Good evening, my friend, and welcome to a quiet journey into the past. As you settle in tonight, I invite you to let go of the noise, the hum of the day, the flicker of thoughts, even the ticking clock on the wall. Let's leave it all behind. Instead, allow me to take you somewhere quiet, somewhere forgotten by time. Tonight, we'll be slipping into the hushed world of medieval libraries. But this is no ordinary tale of dusty bookshelves and ancient scrolls. No, this is a story wrapped in stillness. A story of candlelit halls where whispers were forbidden, where the turning of a single page could echo like a bell in the silence. Imagine a place so quiet, you could hear the heartbeat of time. These libraries weren't simply buildings, they were sanctuaries, carefully guarded by monks who treated each book as a sacred artifact. Before the printing press, every word was written by hand, and each stroke of ink on parchment carried centuries of knowledge, scripture, and power. Silence wasn't just polite, it was holy. And in this story, you'll meet the silence face to face. We'll sit beside a young scribe, barely more than a boy, eyes wide as he learns the rhythm of the quill. You'll hear the creak of wooden benches, the soft flutter of a candle's flame, the distant chant of evening prayers. If this gentle story brings a bit of peace to your night, perhaps give it a quiet like, or subscribe to our cozy little community. Each week, more of you from across the world join us, from warm Arizona porches to chilly Scottish coastlines, and I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Now, go ahead and find your perfect spot. Tuck yourself in with your softest pillow, your warmest blanket. Take a slow, deep breath in, and as you exhale, let go of the day. Let it drift downstream like leaves on a quiet river. And when you're ready, open your mind's eye. You blink awake on a rough wooden bench. The room is cool and smells of ink, beeswax, and aged vellum. Candles flicker in iron sconces along stone walls. Nearby, hooded monks lean over ancient texts, the only sound the soft scratch of quills on parchment. You are no longer in your bedroom. You are in a 12th century English monastery. A novice scribe, a witness to the eerie, beautiful silence of the scriptorium. And tonight, you'll learn why that silence was not just tradition, but something closer to sacred. Welcome to the scary silence of medieval libraries. Picture a time when books were rarer than gold. Not just valuable, but sacred. In the 12th century, long before printing presses and bookstores, each book was an artifact of immense effort. Every letter, every symbol was handcrafted by candlelight, carefully drawn onto vellum, animal skin, by the steady hands of monks. These monks lived in places called monasteries, quiet religious communities nestled within the English countryside. Many of them belonged to the Benedictine order, a group of devoted men who followed the rule of Saint Benedict, a life structured by prayer, labor, and silence. Among their many responsibilities, one task was especially sacred: the preservation of knowledge. At the heart of each monastery was a room known as the scriptorium, from the Latin word scribery, meaning to write. Here, rows of monks worked in stillness, hunched over long wooden desks. The only sounds were the scratch of quills on parchment, the creak of old benches, and perhaps the faint rustle of a robe as someone shifted in their seat. No idle chatter. No music. Just pure, contemplative silence. This silence wasn't a rule for the sake of order. It was a kind of worship. The monks believed that to copy the holy scriptures, or even the rare scholarly texts they possessed, required not only attention but reverence. Words, after all, were powerful. They could carry faith, science, philosophy, entire worlds. And so, in the flickering golden light of beeswax candles, surrounded by cool stone walls, these monks worked. The library was a place of whispers, of soft footfalls, and quiet breaths. Candlelight would dance gently across shelves of chained books, their pages heavy and often illuminated with intricate illustrations. The monks wore long robes, often black or brown, and moved like shadows between their workstations. To step into this world was to leave behind the noise of the outside. There were no clocks, only the rhythm of the monastic bell, guiding the day from early morning prayer to evening reflection. The air smelled of old parchment, melted wax, and ink made from oak galls and iron salts. It was a life of routine, of discipline, and of profound quietude. And now, you are part of it. Let's drift now to your first morning in the scriptorium. You are a novice, young, unsure, but full of awe. The sun has just begun to rise, casting a pale blue glow through the narrow arched windows. The room is waking up, but without a sound. Today, your journey as a keeper of knowledge begins. The sun barely crests the hills as you step into the cool, shadowed library. A faint mist lingers outside the cloister, curling around ancient stones like whispered prayers ascending to heaven. Your bare feet touch the cold flagstones, each step echoing softly in the vast silence that seems to live and breathe within these walls. The scriptorium stretches before you, a long chamber carved from gray stone that has witnessed centuries of devotion. Narrow windows pierce the thick walls, their glass precious and rare, casting gentle rectangles of early morning light across rows of wooden desks. Each desk bears the tools of a sacred craft. Quills arranged with military precision, small pots of ink darker than midnight, and sheets of vellum so fine they seem to glow in the dim light. You pause at the threshold, overwhelmed by the weight of silence. It's not the empty quiet of an abandoned place, but something deeper, a living hush that wraps around you like a warm cloak. This is the silence of reverence, of minds bent to holy work, of souls seeking the divine through the careful formation of each letter. Brother Thomas, the scriptorium's master, approaches with footsteps so soft they barely disturb the dust motes dancing in the morning light. His brown Benedictine habit rustles gently as he moves, the sound like autumn leaves settling on still water. His eyes, kind but serious, meet yours as he gestures toward an empty desk near the window. "Welcome, young brother," he whispers, his voice barely audible, yet somehow carrying the weight of ceremony. "Here, in this sacred space, you will learn that silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of something far greater." You settle onto the wooden bench, its surface worn smooth by generations of scribes who have sat here before you. The desk before you holds mysteries, a half-finished page of scripture, its Latin words marching across the vellum in perfect formation. The ink has dried to a rich brown, and you can see where the previous scribe's hand trembled slightly at the end of a long day's work. Brother Thomas places a fresh sheet of vellum before you. The parchment is cream-colored and smooth, prepared from the hide of a young calf through a process that took weeks of careful attention. First, the hide was soaked in lime water to remove the hair, then stretched on a wooden frame and scraped with a curved knife until it achieved this perfect, writing-ready surface. The monastery's parchment maker, Brother Benedict, has been perfecting this craft for 30 years, and each sheet represents hours of patient labor. "Feel its texture," Brother Thomas instructs in the barest whisper. "This vellum will carry the word of God. It must be treated with the same reverence you would show a sacred relic." Your fingers trace the surface, noting its subtle grain and the way it seems to warm under your touch. Somewhere in the scriptorium, another scribe's quill scratches steadily against parchment, the sound rhythmic and soothing, like rain on a thatched roof. The monastery follows the rule of Saint Benedict, written 3 centuries ago, which governs every aspect of monastic life. Among its many precepts is the sacred importance of silence, particularly during work hours. "Silence," Brother Thomas continues, his voice so soft you must lean forward to hear, "is the garden in which wisdom grows. When we still our tongues, we open our hearts to receive divine inspiration. Each letter you form in this silence is both a prayer and a gift to future generations." He demonstrates the proper way to hold a quill, cut from the wing feather of a goose, its tip carefully shaped with a sharp knife. The quill feels strange in your hand at first, so much lighter than the tools of your former life. Brother Thomas shows you how to dip it in the ink, how to let the excess drip away, how to approach the parchment with the reverence of a pilgrim approaching a shrine. The ink itself is a marvel of medieval chemistry. Made from oak galls, those strange, round growths that appear on oak trees when wasps lay their eggs, mixed with iron sulfate and bound with gum arabic. The oak galls are crushed and boiled, releasing tannic acid that combines with the iron to create a deep, permanent black. This ink will last for centuries, long after your hands have returned to dust. As you make your first tentative marks on the practiced parchment, you become aware of the scriptorium's subtle rhythms. 23 monks work here, each at his appointed task. Some copy biblical texts, others transcribe the works of the Church Fathers, and a few fortunate souls work on the classical texts that have been preserved from the ancient world. Aristotle's writings, Pliny's natural history, fragments of Cicero's orations. The monastery's library contains over 300 volumes, making it one of the richest collections in all of England. Each book represents months or even years of labor. A single copy of the Bible requires the skins of an entire flock of sheep, and can take a scribe 2 years to complete. The Lindisfarne Gospels, created in the monastery of Lindisfarne just 2 centuries ago, took Brother Eadfrith nearly a decade to complete, every page a masterpiece of calligraphy and illumination. You don't need to remember these details, just let them drift through your mind like clouds across a summer sky. The important thing is the feeling of this place, the way the silence seems to hold centuries of devotion, the way each scratch of the quill adds another note to an eternal song of preservation. Brother Thomas guides your hand as you form your first letter, a simple that will begin a psalm. The curve of the letter feels sacred under your inexperienced fingers, and you understand suddenly why the monks treat this work with such reverence. You are not merely copying words, you are preserving the very foundations of knowledge itself. In the world beyond these walls, Brother Thomas whispers, books are rarer than gold. A single volume might be worth more than a knight's destrier, more precious than a lord's finest jewel. But here, surrounded by this blessed silence, we create treasures that will outlast kingdoms. The morning sun climbs higher, its light growing stronger as it streams through the windows. Dust motes dance in the golden beams, and you can hear the distant sound of the monastery's bell calling the brothers to terce, the 3rd hour of prayer. But in the scriptorium, the work continues unabated. This is itself a form of prayer, this careful preservation of wisdom. Your shoulders begin to ache slightly from the unfamiliar posture, but there's something deeply satisfying about the work. Each letter forms under your quill like a small miracle, black ink flowing onto pale vellum in shapes that carry meaning across centuries. The silence that initially felt oppressive now seems protective, a gentle boundary that separates this sacred work from the chaos of the world beyond. You may already be drifting off, carried by the rhythm of the quill and the soft breathing of the scribes around you. That's perfectly fine. Let the gentle scratch of pen on parchment carry you deeper into this peaceful world. The monastery will continue its work while you rest, as it has for generations, as it will for generations to come. As the morning sun climbs higher, your work quietly continues, each letter a small act of devotion, each word a bridge between the wisdom of the past and the hope of the future. In this sacred silence, time moves differently, marked not by the urgent demands of the world, but by the gentle rhythm of creation itself. The scriptorium holds its breath around you, a sanctuary of learning where silence is not emptiness, but fullness. Full of possibility, full of peace, full of the quiet joy that comes from work well done in service of something greater than oneself. Your fingers tremble slightly as you dip the quill into the ink, the silence pressing gently around you like a soft blanket. The morning has settled into a rhythm now, and the scriptorium hums with the quiet industry of devoted souls. Your first day of true copying begins, and with it comes the weight of responsibility that each scribe must learn to carry. Brother Thomas has left you with a simple text to begin, a passage from the Book of Psalms that every monk knows by heart. Yet seeing it laid out before you in the exemplar, the master copy from which you'll work, fills you with both wonder and trepidation. Each letter must be perfect, each word a faithful reproduction of the sacred original. The quill feels heavier in your hand than it did during yesterday's practice. Not physically, it remains as light as the feather from which it was cut, but weighted with purpose. This is no longer an exercise in forming letters, but the creation of something that will endure. Brother Aldrich, the monastery's eldest scribe, often reminds the novices that manuscripts they create today may still be read 300 years hence, when their bodies have long since returned to dust. You position the quill carefully above the first word, Beatus. Blessed. The letter B requires a steady hand and confident strokes. You've practiced it dozens of times on your wax tablet, but parchment is unforgiving. There can be no erasures here, no starting over. Each mark becomes permanent, part of the sacred record. The ink flows from your quill in a thin, dark line. The oak gall ink has a particular smell, earthy and slightly metallic, like the forest floor after rain mixed with the scent of iron. Brother Marcus, who prepares the ink in the monastery's scriptorium, explained the process to you just yesterday. The oak galls must be collected in autumn when they're richest in tannins, then crushed and steeped in water for days. The iron comes from old nails and horseshoes, carefully dissolved in vinegar until the liquid turns a deep rust color. The ink must be neither too thick nor too thin, Brother Marcus had whispered, his voice barely disturbing the sacred quiet. Too thick, and it clots on the quill. Too thin, and it spreads beyond the letter's proper bounds. Like faith itself, it must be perfectly balanced. As you form each letter, you become acutely aware of your posture. The wooden bench beneath you is hard, designed more for discipline than comfort. Your back already aches from the unfamiliar position. Spine straight, shoulders square, head bent at just the right angle to see the work clearly without casting shadows. The scribes around you maintain this posture for hours at a time, some of them well into their 70s, their bodies shaped by decades of devoted copying. Brother Columba, seated at the desk beside yours, moves his quill with the fluid grace of long practice. His letters flow across the vellum like water finding its course down a hillside, each one perfectly formed, perfectly spaced. He's copying a text by St. Augustine, and you catch glimpses of the Latin words as they appear under his practiced hand. Seor nostrum in quietum est. Our heart is restless until it rests in you. The parchment beneath your quill tells its own story of patient craftsmanship. This particular sheet came from a calf that grazed in the monastery's own fields, tended by Brother Francis and the lay brothers who work the land. After the animal was slaughtered for food, nothing is wasted in monastic life. Its hide began a transformation that would take weeks to complete. First, the fresh hide was stretched on a wooden frame and soaked in lime water for days, the caustic solution loosening the hair and flesh. Then came the careful scraping, Brother Benedict working with a curved knife called a lunarium, its crescent shape perfect for removing every trace of hair and membrane without damaging the skin beneath. The hide was stretched tighter, scraped again, then treated with chalk to absorb any remaining oils. The final step was the most delicate, using pumice stone to create the perfect writing surface, smooth enough for the finest quill work, yet with just enough texture to hold the ink. A single hide might yield a dozen sheets of writing parchment, each one precious beyond measure. You don't need to hold on to these details, just let them drift through your mind like incense rising from the chapel altar. Your hand cramps slightly as you reach the end of the first line. The quill, cut from a goose's primary flight feather, must be held at precisely the right angle to create letters of consistent width. Too steep, and the line becomes thin and weak. Too shallow, and the ink pools and spreads. Brother Thomas spent an entire morning teaching you the proper grip, your fingers positioned just so, the quill resting in the web between thumb and forefinger. The silence of the scriptorium is broken only by the soft sounds of creation. Quills scratching against parchment, the gentle rustle of a monk turning a page in his exemplar, the barely audible whisper of breath from 23 devoted scribes. Occasionally, someone will pause to trim his quill with a small, sharp knife, the blade carefully shaping the tip to maintain its writing edge. Brother Anselm, working at a desk near the far wall, specializes in the most challenging texts. Today he's copying a work of natural philosophy, describing the movement of the celestial spheres. His letters are smaller than yours, allowing more text on each precious sheet of vellum. Master scribes like Brother Anselm can fit 40 lines on a page that might hold only 30 in the hands of a novice. As the morning progresses, you become aware of your body's rebellion against this sedentary work. Your shoulders ache, your neck grows stiff, and your right hand develops a persistent cramp. The monks call this scribe's curse, and it affects everyone who takes up the quill. Brother Columba once confided that his hands remain curled even in sleep, permanently shaped by decades of holding writing instruments. Yet there's something deeply satisfying about the work that transcends physical discomfort. Each word that flows from your quill connects you to an unbroken chain of learning stretching back to the apostles themselves. The psalm you're copying was first written by King David nearly 2,000 years ago, translated into Latin by St. Jerome, and now passes through your hand to future generations. The monastery's library contains works that exist nowhere else in the world. When the Roman Empire fell and barbarian tribes swept across Europe, many libraries were destroyed, their precious contents lost forever. But here, in monasteries like this one scattered across Christendom, devoted monks preserved the treasures of human knowledge. Aristotle's writings on logic, Pliny's observations of the natural world, the poetry of Virgil, all survived because scribes like you were willing to spend their lives in patient copying. You may already be drifting off, carried by the rhythm of the quill and the gentle breathing of your fellow scribes. The monastery continues its work around you, this great engine of preservation turning slowly but steadily, day after day, year after year. Let the soft scratching of pens on parchment carry you deeper into peace. Brother Thomas appears at your shoulder like a gentle shadow, his presence felt rather than seen. He examines your morning's work with kind but discerning eyes, noting the places where your letters waver, where your spacing becomes uneven. His corrections come not as criticism, but as gifts, small adjustments that will make your work more worthy of its sacred purpose. Remember, he whispers, his breath barely stirring the air. Each letter is a prayer, each word an offering. Do not rush toward completion, for in this work, the journey matters more than the destination. As you dip your quill once more into the dark ink, you notice how the morning light has shifted, moving across the scriptorium floor like the hand of a great sundial. Time moves differently here, measured not in the urgent moments of worldly affairs, but in the slow, steady accumulation of words, the patient building of something eternal. The candle at your desk burns lower, its flame steady in the still air. Soon it will need replacing, but for now it provides just enough additional light to see your work clearly. The beeswax candles are made by Brother Matthias in the monastery's own workshop, using honey from the hives maintained in the kitchen garden. Even this simple light carries the blessing of labor offered in devotion. As the candle burns low, the story quietly shifts, but the work continues, each stroke of the quill adding another thread to the great tapestry of preserved knowledge. Woven in silence, bound in devotion, destined to outlast empires and ages in the patient hands of those who understand that some treasures are worth a lifetime of quiet labor. The sun streams through a narrow window, warming the stone floor beneath your feet, as the soft rustle of pages fills the air. Noon has arrived in the scriptorium, marked not by the clanging of worldly bells, but by the gentle shift of light across the ancient stones. The monastery follows the sacred rhythm of the hours, and at this midday moment, the library pulses with quiet industry. 23 monks bend over their desks like devotees at prayer, which indeed they are. Each stroke of the quill is an act of worship, each completed line a small offering to the divine. The silence remains unbroken, yet the scriptorium feels alive with purpose. You can sense the concentration in the air, thick as incense, as sacred as the smoke rising from the chapel's altar. Brother Aldrich, his white hair catching the sunlight, works at the scriptorium's most honored desk. At 73 years old, he has spent more than half a century in this room, his weathered hands copying everything from biblical commentaries to the philosophical works of Boethius. Today he labors over a psalter, a book of psalms intended for the monastery's choir. His letters are perfect despite his age, each one formed with the precision of a master craftsman who has found his life's purpose in the marriage of ink and vellum. The warmth of the noon sun reveals details hidden in the morning's dimmer light. You notice how each monk has arranged his workspace with almost ritualistic precision. Quills stand in small holders made from hollowed reeds, their tips carefully trimmed and ready for use. Ink pots sit at exactly the right distance to avoid accidental spills, their dark surfaces occasionally catching and reflecting the golden light. Small knives for trimming quills rest within easy reach, their blades sharp enough to split a hair. Brother Jerome, working 3 desks away, pauses to consult his exemplar, a magnificent copy of Aristotle's writings on natural philosophy that arrived at the monastery 20 years ago, a gift from a traveling scholar. The text discusses the movement of the heavenly spheres, complex ideas that must be copied with absolute precision. A single misplaced word could corrupt centuries of accumulated wisdom. These classical texts represent one of the monastery's greatest treasures. When the barbarian invasions swept across Europe, destroying libraries and scattering scholars, works like these survived only because monks recognized their value and devoted themselves to their preservation. Aristotle's logic, Cicero's rhetoric, Virgil's poetry, all passed through hands like yours, saved from extinction by patient scribes working in scriptoriums across Christendom. The vellum beneath Brother Jerome's quill glows in the afternoon light, its surface so finely prepared it seems almost luminous. This particular sheet came from the hide of a lamb, even more precious than calfskin for its exceptional smoothness. The monastery's flock grazes on the hillsides beyond the walls, tended by Brother Francis, who knows each animal by name. When one is chosen for this higher purpose, its hide undergoes a transformation as sacred as any ritual. You let your gaze drift across the scriptorium, noting how the noon light reveals the true colors of the work being created. Brother Matthew's illuminated initial glows like a jewel against the pale parchment, a letter D decorated with intertwining vines and tiny birds, their wings picked out in gold leaf so thin it seems to float above the page. The pigments he uses come from across the known world. Ultramarine blue ground from lapis lazuli brought by merchants from the distant mountains of Afghanistan, vermilion red made from cinnabar found in Spanish mines, and gold leaf beaten so thin that a single coin can cover dozens of letters. The monastery's collection of completed books rests in the armarium, the great oak cupboard that serves as the library proper. Brother Librarian Benedict maintains these volumes with the devotion of a guardian protecting relics. Each book is wrapped in silk or fine linen, protected from dust and dampness. The most precious volumes are chained to reading stands, their iron links ensuring that these irreplaceable treasures never leave the scriptorium. Among the monastery's most prized possessions is a complete copy of the Bible in 4 volumes, each one containing roughly 500 pages of text. The project took 3 scribes nearly 4 years to complete, working in shifts to maintain consistency in the letter forms. The final product weighs as much as a small child and represents the labor of thousands of hours, cutting quills, preparing ink, scraping parchment, and forming each of the nearly 1 million individual letters. You can hear the gentle sound of Brother Anselm sharpening his quill with a small knife, the blade making tiny scraping sounds against the feather's shaft. The art of quill preparation is as important as the writing itself. Each feather must be carefully selected. The primary flight feathers of geese are preferred, taken during the molting season when they fall naturally. The quill is then heated gently to harden it, the tip cut at a precise angle to create the proper writing edge. The scratching of quills against parchment creates a subtle symphony in the noonlit scriptorium. Each scribe works at his own pace, some swift and confident, others slow and deliberate. Brother Columba's pen moves like a dance, flowing across the page in smooth, rhythmic strokes. Beside him, young Brother David, only recently arrived from the monastery school, works with painstaking care, forming each letter as if it were a tiny architectural marvel. The monastery follows the rule of Saint Benedict, which emphasizes the importance of manual labor alongside prayer and study. Idleness is the enemy of the soul, the rule teaches, and in the scriptorium, there is no room for idleness. Every moment is occupied with purpose, every movement directed toward the preservation and transmission of sacred knowledge. The sun reaches its zenith, flooding the scriptorium with golden light that transforms the entire space. The stone walls seem to glow from within, and the wooden desks take on the warm hue of honey. This is the most productive hour of the day, when light is abundant and the morning's prayers have settled the mind into perfect focus. You don't need to remember every detail. Just let the peaceful scene wash over you like warm water, carrying away the tensions of the day. Brother Thomas moves silently between the desks, checking on each scribe's progress. His presence is felt rather than seen, a gentle reminder that this work is both individual and communal. When he pauses at your desk to examine your morning's progress, his approval comes in the form of a slight nod, a gesture that carries more weight than any spoken praise. The texts being copied today represent the full spectrum of medieval learning. Brother Augustine works on a collection of saints' lives, stories of holy men and women whose faith sustained them through persecution and hardship. Brother Peter copies a treatise on astronomy, describing the movements of planets and stars as they wheel through the heavens according to God's perfect design. Brother Mark transcribes a work of moral theology, exploring the proper relationship between the soul and its creator. Each of these texts will eventually leave the scriptorium to serve its intended purpose. Some will remain in the monastery's own library, available for study and meditation. Others will travel to daughter houses of the order, carrying the monastery's learning to new communities of monks. A few will find their way into the hands of bishops and abbots, helping to spread orthodox teaching throughout the church. As the noon hour progresses, you become aware of the subtle rhythms that govern this sacred work. Every few minutes, someone dips his quill in ink, the small sound barely disturbing the silence. Occasionally, a scribe will pause to consult his exemplar, turning a page with the reverence due to Holy Scripture. The steady breathing of 23 devoted souls creates an almost imperceptible current in the still air. The monastery's cats, allowed into the scriptorium to control mice that might damage precious parchments, sleep peacefully in patches of sunlight. Their presence reminds you that even in this most sacred of spaces, the natural world maintains its gentle claim. Brother Francis often says that all creation participates in the great work of praise, from the singing birds outside the windows to the silent scribes within. Let your mind rest now, floating in the quiet rhythm of this holy place. The sun continues its ancient journey across the sky, marking time as it has since the world began. The scribes continue their patient labor, adding their own small chapters to the great book of preserved wisdom. You may feel your eyes growing heavy now, lulled by the soft scratching of quills and the warm touch of afternoon light. The monastery's bell tower stands silent at this hour, waiting for the call to none, the ninth-hour prayer. But here in the scriptorium, prayer continues without words, expressed in the careful formation of each letter, the reverent handling of each sheet of vellum, the patient devotion that transforms simple materials into vessels of eternal truth. As the light begins its subtle shift toward afternoon, let's drift to another corner of the monastery, where different mysteries await in the gentle silence that guards all sacred work, all patient labor offered in service of something greater than the individual soul. A monk nearby dips his brush into crimson pigment, painting delicate vines that curl around a capital letter. The silence feels alive, guarding the secrets of these pages. As the afternoon light shifts and deepens, casting longer shadows across the stone floor, you discover that the scriptorium holds mysteries far beyond the simple copying of text. Here, in the hands of master illuminators, manuscripts transform into windows to heaven itself. Brother Illuminator Gabriel works at a desk positioned to catch the best light, his workspace a marvel of organized creativity. Before him spread dozens of small ceramic pots, each containing pigments that represent the treasures of the known world. The vermilion red he applies with such delicate precision comes from cinnabar mines in distant Spain, ground to powder finer than flour and mixed with egg white to create a paint that will glow like fire for centuries to come. His current project is a psalter intended for the monastery's abbot, a book of such beauty that it will serve not only for prayer, but as a testament to the glory of God made manifest through human artistry. The page before him shows the beginning of Psalm 23, Dominus regit me, the Lord is my shepherd. The initial D has been transformed into a fantastic creation. Golden vines spiral through its curves, tiny birds perch on delicate branches, and microscopic flowers bloom in colors that seem to capture light itself. You watch, mesmerized, as Brother Gabriel loads his finest brush, made from a single hair of a red squirrel's tail, with ultramarine blue. This pigment, more precious than gold, comes from lapis lazuli stones carried by caravans across thousands of miles from the mountains of Afghanistan. The stone must be ground with infinite patience, separated from its rocky matrix, and purified until only the purest blue remains. A small pot of ultramarine represents months of a merchant's profits and a year's wages for a common laborer. The technique Brother Gabriel employs has been refined over generations of monastic artists. First, he sketches the design with a silver point, lines so faint they're barely visible. Then comes the laying of colors, each one applied in thin, translucent layers that build up gradually like morning mist condensing into dew. The gold leaf comes last, applied over a base of red bole, a fine clay that provides the perfect foundation for the precious metal. As you observe his work, Brother Gabriel speaks in the barest whisper, his voice softer than the brush strokes he applies to the vellum. Each color tells a story, he murmurs, never lifting his eyes from the page. Blue speaks of heaven's infinite expanse. Red carries the passion of divine love. Gold reflects the glory that awaits the faithful. We are not merely decorating pages. We are translating the language of the divine into forms that earthly eyes can comprehend. The gold leaf he applies is so thin that if you held a sheet up to the light, you could read through it. It's beaten from solid gold coins by Brother Matthias in the monastery's workshop, hammered between sheets of vellum until each piece becomes thinner than a butterfly's wing. The application requires absolute steadiness of hand. One tremor, one breath too strong, and the delicate leaf will crumble or blow away like autumn's last leaves. At another desk, Brother Illuminator Thomas works on an entirely different type of manuscript, a bestiary, a book of animals both real and mythical. His current page depicts a pelican, that most Christian of birds, which according to medieval belief pierces its own breast to feed its young with its blood, symbolizing Christ's sacrifice for humanity. The pelican's feathers are rendered in such detail that each one seems ready to flutter in an unfelt breeze, while drops of crimson blood fall like tiny rubies onto the parchment below. The monastery's library contains several such bestiaries, each one a wonder of symbolic art. Lions represent courage and resurrection. For medieval scholars believed lion cubs were born dead and brought to life on the third day by their father's breath, mirroring Christ's resurrection. Unicorns symbolize purity and could only be tamed by a virgin, representing the incarnation. Even the humble ant, shown carrying grain to its nest, speaks of the industrious Christian preparing for the heavenly harvest. Brother Thomas's pigments come from sources that would astound the uninitiated. The deep purple adorning the pelican's breast is made from murex shells, collected by divers who risk their lives in the Mediterranean's depths. A single pound of this Tyrian purple requires thousands of shells and costs more than most men earn in a lifetime. The brilliant yellow comes from orpiment, a mineral containing arsenic that must be handled with extreme care. Too much contact with the skin can cause illness or death. The parchment itself upon which these illuminations bloom represents months of preparation. The finest manuscripts use uterine vellum, parchment made from the skins of unborn calves, removed from their mothers after slaughter. This creates a surface of unparalleled smoothness and whiteness, perfect for the most delicate artwork. The preparation process involves soaking, scraping, stretching, and finally polishing with pumice stone until the surface becomes as smooth as silk. You don't need to carry these details with you. Let them drift through your consciousness like incense smoke, adding richness to the scene without burdening your mind. What matters is the sense of wonder, the realization that each illuminated page represents not just artistic skill, but a profound act of devotion, a prayer made visible through color and gold. Brother Gabriel pauses in his work to mix a new color, combining ground malachite with egg yolk to create a green that seems to pulse with inner life. The malachite comes from copper mines in Cyprus, its bright green crystals ground to powder in the monastery's own workshop. The process of preparing pigments is itself a form of meditation. The repetitive motion of the grinding stone, the gradual transformation of raw mineral into pure color, the careful mixing that determines whether the final hue will sing with vibrancy or fall flat with muddy disappointment. The brushes used for this finest work come from animals across Europe and beyond. The best brushes for detail work use hair from the tips of Kalinsky sables' tails, prized for their ability to hold a fine point while carrying sufficient paint for smooth application. For broader areas, brushes made from squirrel hair provide the softness needed to lay down even washes of color. Each brush is carefully maintained, cleaned after use with special solutions, and stored with the reverence due to sacred instruments. As the afternoon light begins to slant lower through the windows, the illuminated pages seem to come alive. The gold leaf catches and throws back the dying sunlight, creating tiny mirrors that scatter rainbow fragments across the stone walls. Brother Gabriel's pelican appears ready to take flight, while Brother Thomas's fantastic vines seem to rustle with an unfelt breeze. The secrets of the scriptorium extend beyond even these visible marvels. Hidden in the binding of each completed book are tiny relics, fragments of saints' bones, threads from their garments, specks of dust from the Holy Land itself. These sacred editions transform each manuscript into a reliquary, a container for the holy that sanctifies both the book and all who read from it. Some manuscripts contain hidden messages, visible only to those who know where to look. Brother Gabriel sometimes incorporates the names of benefactors or the dates of important events into the decorative borders, weaving letters so seamlessly into the artistic design that they become invisible to casual observation. These secret inscriptions connect each book to its particular moment in history, preserving not just the text but the circumstances of its creation. The monastery's most precious illuminated manuscripts are kept in a special chest in the abbot's private chamber, brought out only for the most solemn occasions. Among these treasures is a gospel book whose every page blazes with gold, its cover encrusted with gems that once adorned a king's crown. When opened for reading during the most important feasts, the book literally glows in the candlelight, its illuminations creating an earthly reflection of the celestial glory it describes. You may already be drifting now, carried by the gentle rhythm of brush on parchment and the soft whisper of Brother Gabriel's breathing as he concentrates on his delicate work. The scriptorium continues its ancient dance of creation around you, colors flowing like liquid light, gold leaf settling like fallen stars, each stroke of the brush adding another note to the great symphony of preserved beauty. The cats that patrol the scriptorium pause occasionally to observe the illuminators at work, their feline eyes reflecting the glints of gold and jewel-bright pigments. Even they seem to sense that something sacred transpires here, something that transforms mere animal skins and mineral pigments into vessels capable of carrying divine beauty across the centuries. As the colors fade into the evening light, let's drift elsewhere in this sanctuary of art and learning, where other mysteries await discovery in the gentle hands of those who understand that some secrets are too beautiful to speak aloud, too precious to trust to any medium less permanent than gold and stone, and the patient devotion of souls dedicated to capturing glimpses of eternity. You step into the cloister, the air cool and fragrant with lavender and rosemary, as a soft breeze brushes your face. After hours bent over your writing desk, your shoulders ache with the gentle strain of careful work, and your eyes welcome the change from flickering candlelight to the soft, natural glow of afternoon sun filtering through stone arches. The monastery's garden stretches before you like a peaceful sanctuary within a sanctuary. Stone pathways wind between carefully tended beds of herbs, their leaves rustling with the quietest whisper as the breeze moves through them. You don't need to remember the names of each plant. Let them simply drift through your awareness like a gentle meditation. Your feet find their way to a weathered stone bench, its surface worn smooth by generations of monks who have sought the same quiet respite you now crave. As you settle onto the cool stone, you feel your body releasing the tension of the morning's work, muscle by muscle, like a gentle unwinding. The garden hums with life, but it's the softest kind of activity. The drowsy buzz of bees moving from bloom to bloom, their wings catching tiny fragments of sunlight. A fat bumblebee lands on a nearby sprig of thyme, its fuzzy body dusted with golden pollen. You watch without urgency, letting your mind rest in the simple pleasure of observing this small, perfect moment. From somewhere beyond the garden walls comes the distant sound of the monks' afternoon prayers, their voices rising and falling in ancient Latin chants. The melody drifts to you like incense on the air, not demanding your attention but simply there, a gentle reminder of the rhythm that governs this peaceful place. You may already be slipping into sleep, and that's just fine. Let the chanting carry you deeper into rest. The herbs around you have been carefully chosen for their practical purposes. The rosemary will be dried and ground to make a deep blue-black ink for special manuscripts. The lavender will scent the sachets placed between precious pages to keep insects away. But right now, they simply exist to soothe your senses. The sharp, clean scent of rosemary mixing with lavender's drowsy sweetness. A small lizard darts across the sun-warmed stones near your feet, pausing to bask in a patch of light before disappearing into the shadows between the herb beds. Even the smallest creatures here seem to understand the monastery's devotion to quiet contemplation. You lean back against the garden wall, feeling the ancient stones still holding warmth from the morning sun. The wall is thick, built to last centuries, and against your back, it feels solid and eternal, like the knowledge being preserved just beyond these peaceful gardens. But you don't need to think about that now. Just rest here, breathing in the herb-scented air. Medieval monastery gardens like this one served many purposes beyond beauty. They provided medicine for the infirmary, food for the kitchen, and materials for the scriptorium. Monks would harvest oak galls from the garden's single great oak tree, boiling them with iron to create the rich black ink that flows from your quill. They grew flax for making linen, which would be stretched and prepared as a surface for their finest illuminated manuscripts. But these details can drift through your mind like clouds across a summer sky. Present but not demanding, peaceful but not insistent. The garden exists in this moment simply as a place of rest, where the day's work pauses and your spirit can breathe. A cat appears from nowhere, as cats do, picking its way delicately between the herb beds with that particular feline grace. It's a monastery cat, well-fed and content, its job to keep mice away from the precious manuscripts. The cat settles in a patch of sun near your bench, beginning the slow, methodical process of grooming its fur. Its purring joins the gentle symphony of the garden. Bees humming, leaves rustling, distant chanting, and now this soft, rhythmic rumble of pure contentment. The afternoon light is beginning to slant lower, casting longer shadows across the garden paths. Soon, the bell will ring for vespers, and you'll return to the scriptorium for the evening's work. But not yet. For now, there's only this. The stone bench beneath you, the herb-scented air around you, and the deep, settling peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be. Your breathing slows to match the garden's rhythm. In with the scent of lavender, out with the day's small tensions. In with the warmth of afternoon sun, out with the need to hurry or worry or remember. The garden holds you gently, like a cupped hand holding water, secure and peaceful. A monk passes by on the covered walkway that borders the garden, his sandaled feet making the softest whisper against the stone. He doesn't look your way, not from rudeness, but from respect for your moment of solitude. In this place, Even companionship can be a form of silence, a shared understanding that some moments are too peaceful to disturb with words. The bees continue their work among the flowers, their movements becoming slower and more drowsy as the afternoon warmth settles deeper into the garden. Like them, you feel yourself growing heavy with contentment, your eyelids beginning to flutter with the first gentle pulls of afternoon rest. You may already be drifting off, carried by the rhythm of the garden's breath, and that's perfectly fine. Let the stone bench support you. Let the herb-scented air fill your lungs. Let the distant chanting wrap around you like the softest blanket. There's nothing you need to do right now except rest, except be present in this moment of perfect monastery peace. The sun continues its slow arc across the sky, but time feels suspended here in the garden, as if this moment of rest could stretch on forever. And perhaps, in the deepest sense, this feeling of peace, this breath of calm air, this gentle release from the day's demands. As the garden fades into dusk, the story quietly moves on. The abbot stands at the scriptorium's door, his voice low and warm, like a fire on a winter's night. His presence fills the doorway without urgency, casting a gentle shadow across the stone threshold. The afternoon light catches the silver threads in his dark woolen habit, and you notice how his weathered hands rest peacefully at his sides, fingers stained with decades of ink from his own copying work. "My child," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, yet somehow carrying clearly across the hushed scriptorium. The other monks don't look up from their work, but you sense their quiet attention, the way their quills pause for just a heartbeat before continuing their gentle scratching across the vellum. "Walk with me." You set down your quill carefully, the way you've learned to do everything in this sacred space. The ink glistens wetly on the parchment where you've been copying the Psalms, each letter formed with painstaking care. As you rise from your wooden stool, you feel the stiffness in your back from hours of bent concentration. But it's a good ache, the kind that comes from meaningful work. The abbot's sandals whisper against the stone floor as he leads you toward the far corner of the scriptorium, where a narrow window looks out onto the herb garden. Here, the light is softer, filtered through the thick glass that the monastery's craftsmen made years ago. You can smell the faint scent of rosemary and thyme drifting in through the gaps around the window frame. "You have been with us for 3 weeks now," the abbot begins, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who has spent years in contemplation. "And I have watched you learn our ways. You hold the quill with reverence, you prepare the ink with patience, and you treat each page as if it were made of gold." He pauses, and you notice how his eyes, though lined with age, still hold a spark of curiosity, as if he's seeing the world anew each day. "But I sense questions in you," he continues, settling onto a stone bench that someone long ago carved into the wall. "Questions about our silence, about why we guard it so carefully here in the scriptorium." He gestures for you to sit beside him, and as you do, you feel the coolness of the stone through your rough woolen robe. The abbot is quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward the window where dust motes dance in the afternoon light. When he speaks again, his voice is even softer, as if he's sharing a secret that has been carefully kept for generations. "Silence, my child, is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of the sacred." He folds his hands in his lap, and you notice how still they are, how completely at peace. When we speak without need, we scatter our thoughts like leaves in the wind. But when we embrace silence, we gather our souls like water in a still pool. You don't need to hold on to every word he says, just let them drift through your mind like incense smoke, carrying their meaning without effort. The abbot's wisdom settles around you like a warm blanket, and you feel your breathing slow to match his gentle rhythm. "In the scriptorium," he continues, "we copy the words of prophets and saints, of scholars and kings. These words have traveled across centuries to reach us, carried by countless hands, preserved by countless hearts. When we work in silence, we honor not just the words themselves, but all those who came before us, all those who sacrificed to keep this knowledge alive." Outside the window, you can hear the distant sound of Brother Thomas working in the garden, his hoe scraping softly against the earth. The sound is rhythmic, peaceful, like a lullaby that speaks of seasons turning and life continuing in its quiet cycles. "But there is another reason for our silence," the abbot says, his voice growing even more gentle. "When we still our tongues, we open our hearts. In the quiet, we can hear the voice of the divine speaking through the words we copy. Each letter becomes a prayer, each word a meditation. The silence doesn't separate us from God, it draws us closer." He stands slowly, his knees creaking slightly with age, and moves to the window. The light catches the silver at his temples, and for a moment he looks almost translucent, as if he's already halfway to the heaven he speaks of so often. "Come," he says, beckoning you to join him. From the window, you can see the entire monastery spread out below. The chapel with its simple bell tower, the refectory where meals are shared in contemplative quiet, the dormitory where brothers sleep in cells as sparse as prayer. Gardens stretch between the buildings, filled with herbs and vegetables that sustain both body and soul. All of this, the abbot says, his hand sweeping gently across the vista, exists because of silence. Because men and women chose to step away from the noise of the world and listen instead to the whisper of eternity. His voice carries a deep satisfaction, like someone who has found exactly where he belongs. In the world beyond these walls, he continues, men shout their wisdom from rooftops, they argue and debate and struggle to be heard above the din. But we have learned that the most profound truths are often spoken in whispers, written in silence, lived in quiet devotion. You may already be feeling your eyelids growing heavy, and that's perfectly fine. Let the abbot's words carry you like a gentle current. No need to fight against the drowsiness that comes with such deep peace. When you return to your desk, the abbot says, turning back toward the scriptorium, remember that your silence is a gift to your brothers, who need the quiet to concentrate on their own sacred work. A gift to the words you copy, which deserve to be received with reverence. And a gift to yourself, for in silence, you will discover thoughts and insights that the noise of the world would never allow you to hear. As you walk back across the scriptorium, you notice how the light has shifted, becoming more golden as the day moves toward evening. The monks at their desks seem to glow in this light, each one a figure of perfect concentration, their quills moving in steady rhythm across the parchment. The abbot stops at your desk, where your half-finished page of Psalms waits patiently. "This work you do," he says, his hand resting lightly on the wooden surface, "it will outlast kingdoms. Long after the kings of this age are dust, these words will still carry light into dark places, still offer comfort to troubled hearts." He picks up your quill, examining it with the eye of someone who has spent a lifetime perfecting the craft of writing. "See how the ink flows," he murmurs, more to himself than to you. Each stroke is a small act of faith, a quiet assertion that beauty and truth matter more than the passing concerns of the world. Setting the quill down gently, he places his hand briefly on your shoulder. "Guard our silence well, my child. It is not a burden but a blessing, not a restriction but a freedom. In the quiet, you will find not just the words of the ancients, but the voice of your own soul." As the abbot moves away, his footsteps fading into the general hush of the scriptorium, you settle back onto your stool. The parchment before you seems to shimmer slightly in the golden light, and you understand now that each letter you form is part of something much larger than yourself. A great chain of silence and devotion that stretches back through the centuries and forward into an unknowable future. You don't need to remember all of this, just let it rest in your heart like a warm stone, carrying its heat long after the words themselves have faded. The scriptorium settles back into its familiar rhythm, and you take up your quill once more, ready to continue the sacred work of copying in the blessed silence. As the abbot's words linger in the air like the last notes of a lullaby, let's drift to another corner of the monastery, where the evening shadows are beginning to gather. The monastery sleeps, but you slip through the shadows, your footsteps soft on the cold stone floor, drawn to the library's glow. The corridors stretch before you like dark rivers, broken only by the faint silver light that seeps through narrow windows from the moon above. Your bare feet barely whisper against the worn stones that countless monks have walked before you, each step a quiet rebellion against the deep silence that wraps around the sleeping monastery like a heavy blanket. The air carries a different quality at night, thicker somehow, filled with the accumulated prayers and meditations of generations. You pull your woolen robe closer around your shoulders, feeling the rough fabric against your skin as you navigate the familiar path that leads from the dormitory to the scriptorium. During the day, this journey takes mere minutes, but now, in the hushed darkness, each step feels deliberate, sacred, as if you're walking through a dream. A single candle flickers at the end of the corridor, left burning by Brother Marcus, who tends to the night prayers. The flame dances in its brass holder, casting shadows that seem to breathe against the stone walls. As you pass, the warm light briefly illuminates your face before you slip back into the gentle darkness, drawn by something you can't quite name toward the library that holds such fascination during the daylight hours. The wooden door to the scriptorium stands slightly ajar, and through the gap, you can see the soft glow of another candle, left burning for reasons you don't yet understand. The rule of the monastery is clear. No one should be in the scriptorium after Compline, after the final prayers of the day have been sung and the community has retired to rest. Yet here you are, drawn by curiosity and perhaps something deeper, something that calls to you in the quiet hours when the world seems to hold its breath. You pause at the threshold, your hand resting on the smooth wooden door frame that has been worn soft by countless hands over the decades. The hinges are well-oiled and silent. Even the monastery's doors seem to understand the importance of quiet. As you push the door open just wide enough to slip through, the familiar scent of the scriptorium washes over you. Parchment and ink, beeswax and wood, with the faintest hint of the herbs that Brother Francis uses to prepare certain pigments. Inside, the familiar space has been transformed by darkness and candlelight into something almost magical. The long wooden tables where you and your brothers work during the day now stretch like sleeping giants across the room, their surfaces empty except for the tools of the trade. Quills lined up with military precision, inkpots covered with small cloth squares to prevent dust, and the precious sheets of vellum stacked carefully under wooden weights. The single candle burns on the desk of Brother Aldrich, the eldest scribe, its flame steady and bright in the still air. You wonder why it's been left burning. Perhaps he forgot it after working late, or perhaps there's some purpose you don't yet understand. The light creates a small circle of warmth in the vast darkness, and everything beyond its reach seems to fade into mystery. You move deeper into the scriptorium, your eyes adjusting slowly to the interplay of light and shadow. The familiar desks take on new personalities in the darkness. Your own workspace, where you've spent so many hours learning to form letters with careful precision, looks almost foreign in the candlelight. The half-finished page of Psalms you left there earlier seems to glow faintly, the black ink appearing almost silver in the flickering light. You may feel your eyes growing heavy now, and that's all right. Let the peaceful darkness of the scriptorium cradle you like a gentle embrace, carrying you deeper into this quiet sanctuary where time seems to move differently. The silence here is different from the disciplined quiet of the daytime hours. During the day, the scriptorium hums with controlled activity. The scratch of quills, the rustle of pages, the soft footsteps of monks moving between desks. But now the silence is complete, profound, almost alive. It seems to press gently against your ears, a presence rather than an absence. You notice details that escape attention during the busy daylight hours. The way the stone walls curve slightly, shaped by masons who worked here centuries ago. The grain in the wooden beams overhead, dark lines that flow like frozen rivers across the ceiling. The small alcove where the most precious manuscripts are kept, secured behind an iron grate that gleams dully in the candlelight. Moving closer to Brother Aldrich's desk, you see what he was working on before he left. A page from the Book of Hours, decorated with an intricate border of golden vines. Even in the uncertain light, you can make out the delicate brushstrokes, the way the gold leaf catches and holds the flame's glow. Each tiny leaf on each painted vine has been rendered with extraordinary care, a meditation in miniature that speaks of hours spent in devoted concentration. The ink is still slightly wet in the well beside the manuscript, and you realize that Brother Aldrich must have been working here not long ago. Perhaps he stepped away for just a moment, called by some urgent need or simply overcome by exhaustion. The thought that he might return makes you glance toward the door, but the corridor beyond remains silent and dark. You wonder about the rule that forbids nighttime visits to the scriptorium. Is it simply practical, to prevent accidents with candles, to ensure that the brothers get proper rest? Or is there something deeper, some understanding that certain hours should be reserved for prayer and contemplation rather than the physical work of copying? The abbot's words from earlier today echo in your memory. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of the sacred. Standing here in the candlelit quiet, you begin to understand what he meant. The scriptorium during the day is a place of sacred work, but the scriptorium at night feels like a place of sacred presence. As if the very walls have absorbed the prayers and meditations of all who have worked here, and now, in the deep quiet, that accumulated holiness can be felt more clearly. The candle flame flickers slightly, disturbed by some current of air you can't detect. For a moment, the shadows dance wildly across the walls, creating the illusion of movement in the corners of your vision. Then the flame steadies again, and the shadows settle back into their proper places. The moment leaves you with a strange feeling, as if the scriptorium itself were gently reminding you of its mysterious nature. You walk slowly between the desks, your fingers trailing lightly along their edges. Each workspace tells a story. Brother Thomas keeps his quills arranged by size. Brother Francis has a small cloth stained with various pigments. Brother Matthew's desk bears the faint circular marks left by countless inkpots over the years. During the day, these details fade into the background of activity, but now they seem to speak more clearly of the men who spend their lives in devotion to preserving knowledge. In the far corner of the scriptorium, where the oldest manuscripts are consulted and copied, you find another surprise. A small oil lamp burns on a stone ledge, its flame even steadier than the candle. Someone has definitely been here recently, perhaps is still here, hidden in the shadows beyond the reach of the light. The thought should alarm you, but instead it brings a curious comfort. You are not alone in your nocturnal curiosity. As you approach the lamp, you see that it illuminates a single manuscript laid open on a reading stand. The pages are thick vellum, the text written in a script so ancient you can barely make out the words. But you recognize it as one of the monastery's treasures. A gospel book created here nearly 2 centuries ago, its pages decorated with images of saints and angels rendered in gold and deep blue. The lamp's steady light reveals details invisible by daylight. The way certain letters seem to shimmer with an inner radiance, as if the monks who created them infused them with something more than mere pigment. The faces of the painted saints seem almost alive in the flickering illumination, their eyes holding depths that speak of divine mysteries. You don't need to understand what draws you to these nighttime wanderings. Just let the mystery wash over you like a gentle tide. The scriptorium holds its secrets lightly, sharing them with those who come seeking in the quiet hours when the boundary between prayer and presence grows thin. A soft sound from somewhere in the building, perhaps a door closing or footsteps in a distant corridor, reminds you that you are not supposed to be here. Yet you feel no guilt, only a deep sense of rightness, as if this nighttime pilgrimage were as natural as breathing. The scriptorium seems to welcome your presence, to approve of your curiosity about its deeper mysteries. The oil lamp flickers once, twice, then burns steady again. In that brief uncertainty of light, you could swear you saw a figure standing in the shadows beyond the reading stand, tall, robed, watching with benevolent eyes. But when the light steadies, there is nothing there but darkness and the familiar shapes of desks and stools. Perhaps it was Brother Aldrich, the owner of the burning candle, observing your nighttime exploration with the patience of one who has learned to see the sacred in unexpected moments. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, the spirit of the scriptorium itself, the accumulated presence of all who have worked and prayed within these walls. You may already be slipping into sleep, carried by the gentle darkness and the whisper of ancient mysteries, and that's just fine. Let the scriptorium's nighttime magic cradle you, its silence deeper than the deepest well, its peace more profound than any earthly rest. As you prepare to leave the sacred space and return to your narrow bed in the dormitory, you take one last look around the transformed scriptorium. The candle on Brother Aldrich's desk burns lower now, wax pooling in its brass holder. The oil lamp in the corner continues its steady vigil over the ancient gospel. And somewhere in the shadows, you sense rather than see the presence that watches over this place during the hours when daylight workers sleep. You slip back through the door, pulling it gently closed behind you, and begin the quiet journey back through the corridors. But something has changed in your understanding of this place. The scriptorium is not merely a workshop where manuscripts are copied. It is a living sanctuary where the boundary between earth and heaven grows thin in the deep hours of night. As the candle sputters and the story gently shifts to other quiet corners of the monastery, you carry with you the memory of flame-lit vellum and shadows that seem to hold more than mere absence of light. A stranger's cloak rustles as he enters the scriptorium, his satchel heavy with manuscripts, his eyes bright with stories. The morning light catches the dust motes that swirl around him as he pauses in the doorway, taking in the familiar sight of monks bent over their work. His travel-worn boots are still damp with dew from the road, and his breath mists slightly in the cool air of the stone chamber. You look up from your copying work, your quill poised above the vellum, as this unexpected visitor brings a whisper of the outside world into your quiet sanctuary. The stranger is perhaps 50 years of age, his hair streaked with silver, but his posture still straight and strong. His cloak is made of good wool, deep brown like autumn leaves, but you can see it has been mended in several places with careful stitches. A scholar's life, even a successful one, rarely brings great wealth. His hands, visible as he adjusts his heavy leather satchel, are ink-stained like your own, but the stains are deeper, older, speaking of decades spent in libraries and scriptoriums across the known world. Brother Aldrich, the head scribe, rises from his desk with the deliberate care of someone who has spent too many hours hunched over manuscripts. His joints creak softly as he approaches the visitor, and you notice how his eyes shine with curiosity despite the disciplined calm of his expression. Visitors to the scriptorium are rare, and scholars rarer still. Most who come to the monastery seek spiritual guidance or material assistance, but this man clearly comes seeking knowledge. "Peace be with you, brother," the stranger says, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to speaking in libraries and halls of learning. There's a slight accent there, something that speaks of distant lands, perhaps Francia, or even further south, from the great centers of learning that flourish in warmer climates. "I am Master Geoffrey of Chartres, and I come bearing gifts for your collection, if you would honor me by examining them." The name means nothing to you, but you see recognition flicker across Brother Aldrich's weathered features. Geoffrey of Chartres. You file the name away in your memory, though you don't need to hold on to every detail. Just let these moments drift through your awareness like morning mist, carrying their flavor without demanding your full attention. The satchel that Geoffrey carries looks as travel-worn as its owner, made of leather so old it has taken on the color of dark honey. The brass buckles are green with age but still functional, and you can see how the bag sags with the weight of what it contains. When he opens it, the familiar scent of parchment and ink wafts out, but there's something else too. The smell of foreign places, of libraries you've never seen, of knowledge gathered from corners of the world that exist only in your imagination. "I have here," Geoffrey says, his voice dropping to the whisper that all true scholars instinctively adopt in the presence of books, "a copy of Aristotle's Metaphysics, translated fresh from the Greek by the scholars of Toledo. And here, a treatise on mathematics by one Al-Khwarizmi, brought north from Córdoba." His hands, though stained with ink, handle the manuscripts with the reverence of someone who understands their true value. You may already feel your eyes growing heavy, lulled by the gentle rhythm of scholarly discourse, and that's perfectly fine. Let the soft voices of the learned men wash over you like a familiar lullaby, carrying you deeper into the peaceful world of books and knowledge. Brother Aldrich's intake of breath is barely audible, but in the trained silence of the scriptorium, it sounds like a gasp of wonder. Greek texts are precious beyond measure here in England, where Latin dominates the scholarly world. And Arabic learning. That's almost mythical, tales of mathematical and astronomical knowledge that filters north through Spain like rumors of distant treasure. The two men bend over the manuscripts together, and you see how years of scholarly training have made them brothers despite never having met before. They speak in Latin, naturally, but their conversation is punctuated by longer silences as they examine particular passages, trace difficult words with careful fingers, and share the wordless communication of those who have devoted their lives to learning. Other monks in the scriptorium begin to take notice, though they're too well trained to abandon their work entirely. Brother Thomas, copying a psalter at the desk beside yours, keeps glancing up from his work with barely concealed curiosity. Brother Francis, the illuminator, has actually stopped painting and is listening intently to the conversation, his brush poised forgotten above his palette of brilliant colors. "This passage here," Geoffrey is saying, his finger tracing a line of text in the Aristotle manuscript, has given scholars in Paris considerable difficulty. The translator in Toledo has chosen to render this Greek term as esse, but I've seen versions from Palermo that use existentia. What think you? Brother Aldrich leans closer, his own finger joining Geoffrey's on the page. "The distinction is subtle but important," he murmurs. "If we understand the Greek to mean simple being, then esse serves well. But if there's a sense of coming into being, of the act rather than the state," he trails off, lost in the kind of intellectual puzzle that can occupy scholars for hours. You don't need to follow the intricacies of their philosophical discussion. Instead, let your attention drift to the way the morning light illuminates the manuscripts spread between them, how the careful letters seem to dance in the golden glow. Each word on those pages represents hours of some distant scribe's labor, just as your own work will perhaps someday travel to distant monasteries to be studied by scholars you'll never meet. Geoffrey reaches into his satchel again and produces a smaller volume, bound in red leather that has faded to the color of dried roses. "And this," he says with a smile that transforms his scholarly features into something almost boyish, "this is something quite special. a bestiary compiled in the monastery of St. Denis, with illuminations that, well, you must see for yourself. As he opens the small book, even you can see the magnificence of what lies within. The pages fairly glow with color. Deep blues made from ground lapis lazuli, reds from cinnabar, gold that seems to capture and hold the very light of the sun. The creatures depicted on the pages are both familiar and fantastic. Lions with human faces, birds with jeweled feathers, fish that seem to swim through seas of liquid gold. The monks of St. Denis, Geoffrey explains, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing a beloved story, have access to pigments from traders who deal with the East. Some of these colors, I've never seen there like elsewhere in Francia. Brother Francis abandons all pretense of working and approaches the group. His own illuminators are drawn irresistibly to the masterwork before him. You can see him taking mental notes, studying the techniques used to achieve such vibrant effects. His own work, beautiful as it is, seems suddenly provincial compared to these pages that speak of resources and knowledge far beyond what your monastery can command. Would it be possible, Brother Aldrich asks carefully, to arrange for our scribes to make copies of these texts? We could offer in exchange some of our own treasures. We have an excellent copy of Bede's Historia, and our version of Gregory's Dialogues is particularly fine. Geoffrey nods, clearly pleased by the suggestion. I had hoped you might be interested in such an arrangement. I travel from monastery to monastery precisely to facilitate such exchanges. Knowledge grows when it is shared, withers when it is hoarded. He gestures to the manuscripts spread before them. These texts have already been copied in Chartres, in Paris, in Reims. Each copy makes the knowledge more secure, less likely to be lost to fire or war or simple neglect. The morning passes in quiet negotiation and examination. You return to your own work, but part of your attention remains with the visiting scholar and the treasures he's brought. There's something magical about this intersection of distant learning with your familiar daily routine. Geoffrey's presence makes the scriptorium feel suddenly connected to a vast network of knowledge that spans the known world. As you work, you catch fragments of stories Geoffrey tells during pauses in the scholarly discussion. Tales of the great library at Córdoba, where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars work side by side translating ancient texts. Stories of monasteries in Ireland, where monks preserve classical learning that has been lost elsewhere. Accounts of schools in Italy where students come from across Europe to study mathematics and natural philosophy. Let these tales drift through your mind like clouds across a peaceful sky, carrying their distant colors without demanding that you hold on to every detail. The important thing is not the specifics but the sense of connection, the understanding that your quiet work in this stone scriptorium is part of something much larger than yourself. The noon bell rings, calling the community to the midday meal, but Geoffrey declines the invitation to join them in the refectory. I prefer to take my meals with the books, he says with a gentle smile. They're more reliable conversation partners than most people, and they never argue with your conclusions unless you've made a real error. Brother Aldrich laughs, a sound rarely heard in the hushed scriptorium. A scholar's truth, if ever I've heard one. Very well, we'll have bread and ale brought here, and we can continue our discussions. As the other monks file out for their meal, you linger for a moment, fascinated by this glimpse into a world beyond your monastery walls. Geoffrey notices your attention and approaches your desk, examining the page of Psalms you've been copying with the same careful attention he gave to his precious manuscripts. Fine work, he says simply, but the approval of a scholar who has seen manuscripts from the greatest scriptoriums of Europe makes your heart swell with quiet pride. Clean letters, good spacing, steady hand. With training, you could be a master scribe yourself someday. You don't need to carry the weight of such expectations. Just let his kind words settle into your heart like seeds that might someday bloom. For now, it's enough to know that your careful daily work meets the standards of the wider world of learning. As you finally leave for your own meal, you hear Geoffrey and Brother Aldrich beginning to discuss the practical details of copying arrangements. Which manuscripts to copy first, how to share the cost of materials, how to ensure accuracy in transmission. Their voices blend into the gentle hum of scholarly planning, a sound as soothing as distant bees in a summer garden. As the scholar's stories linger in the air like incense, let's move to another corner of history where patient hands continue the ancient work of preserving knowledge for generations yet unborn. Your hands work a needle through thick thread, the leather cover smooth under your fingers, as the scriptorium hums with quiet focus. The afternoon light streams through the tall windows, casting long rectangles of golden warmth across the stone floor where you sit cross-legged beside Brother Edmund, the monastery's master bookbinder. Your fingers have grown more deft over the past weeks, learning to guide the curved needle through the precise holes he's taught you to pierce in the folded gatherings of vellum. The manuscript you're binding today is a psalter that Brother Thomas completed just yesterday, his careful script flowing across 48 pages of precious vellum. Each gathering of 4 folded sheets creates 16 pages, and you've spent the morning learning to stack them in the proper order, checking and double-checking that the text flows correctly from one section to the next. A mistake here would mean disaster. Pages bound out of sequence, prayers interrupted mid-verse, confusion for any monk who might use this book in his devotions. Brother Edmund watches your work with the patient eyes of someone who has bound hundreds of books over his 30 years in the monastery. His own hands, gnarled now with age and arthritis, still move with surprising grace as he demonstrates each technique. "Feel the thread," he murmurs, his voice barely above a whisper to maintain the scriptorium's sacred quiet. "Too tight and you'll tear the vellum. Too loose and the binding will fail when the book is used." You may already feel your breathing slow to match the gentle rhythm of the binding work, and that's perfectly fine. Let the repetitive motion of needle and thread carry you into a state of peaceful meditation, where time moves differently and each stitch becomes a small prayer. The thread you're using is made from flax grown in the monastery's own fields, spun by Brother Marcus during the long winter evenings when outdoor work becomes impossible. It's been waxed to help it slide smoothly through the vellum, and the wax carries a faint scent of the beehives that Brother Paul tends in the orchard. Everything in the monastery connects to everything else you're learning. The books depend not just on the scribes who write them, but on the farmers who grow the flax, the beekeepers who provide wax, the shepherds whose flocks supply the skins for vellum. Now comes the careful part, Brother Edmund says as you complete the last gathering. The stack of sewn sections sits before you, held together by the network of threads you've woven through their spines. It looks fragile, but Edmund shows you how strong the binding actually is by gently flexing the book. The pages move together smoothly, opening flat without straining the threads. The next step is to attach the wooden boards that will protect the text block. Edmund has prepared these himself from oak taken from trees that grew on monastery land, seasoned for 3 years until the wood is stable and dry. Each board is slightly larger than the pages, providing a protective overhang, and he's cut shallow grooves where the binding threads will be secured. The ancients sometimes used ivory for their finest books, Edmund tells you as he positions the first board, or even silver for the most precious texts. But good oak serves just as well, and it comes from God's creation rather than human vanity. His philosophy is simple and practical, like everything about monastic life. Use what you have, use it well, and let the beauty come from the craftsmanship rather than the expensive materials. You help him thread the binding cords through the grooves in the oak boards, pulling them tight and securing them with wooden pegs he's carved for this purpose. The book begins to take on its final shape, no longer just a collection of loose pages, but a unified object that can be handled, shelved, and treasured for generations. The leather cover comes next, and this is where Brother Edmund's true artistry shows. The hide was prepared months ago through a process that seems almost alchemical in its complexity. First soaked in lime to remove the hair, then scraped clean with curved knives, then soaked again in solutions of oak bark that tan the skin and turn it into supple leather. The piece he's chosen for this psalter is pale brown, smooth as silk under your fingers, with barely visible grain that speaks of the careful selection of the original hide. "Feel how it wants to bend," Edmund says as he shows you how to work with the leather's natural characteristics. Every skin has its own personality, its own way of folding and stretching. You must listen to what it tells you, work with it rather than against it. His hands demonstrate as he speaks, shaping the leather over the wooden boards with gentle pressure, finding the right balance between firm attachment and graceful draping. You don't need to remember every technical detail, just let the process wash over you like a gentle tide. The important thing is not the specifics, but the sense of patient craftsmanship, the understanding that good work cannot be hurried, but must be allowed to develop at its own pace. The leather must be dampened slightly to make it pliable, and Edmund uses a sea sponge soaked in clean water for this purpose. The sponge itself is a marvel to you, brought by traders from distant shores, unlike anything found in the streams and ponds of your familiar countryside. As he works the damp leather around the corners of the wooden boards, You catch the faint salt scent that still clings to the sponge despite years of use. The corners are always the most challenging, Edmund explains as his fingers work the leather into precise folds. Too much material here, and you get ugly bunching. Too little, and the corner won't stay covered. His technique involves a series of precise cuts and folds that seem simple when he demonstrates them, but prove surprisingly difficult when you try to copy his movements on a practice piece. While the leather dries and shapes itself to the boards, Edmund shows you the tools of his trade. There's a collection of bone folders, polished smooth by years of use, each shaped for specific tasks, creasing edges, smoothing surfaces, working leather into tight corners. A set of awls in different sizes for piercing holes. Knives so sharp they can split a hair, kept in leather sheaths to protect their edges. And stamps made from brass and iron, used to impress decorative patterns into the leather covers of the most important books. This stamp, he says, showing you a piece about the size of your thumb, was made by Brother Geoffrey who served here 50 years ago. He carved it himself from a piece of brass, and every book he bound carried this mark. The stamp shows a simple design, a cross surrounded by 4 dots, elegant in its simplicity. When I use it now, it's as if his hands guide mine. The work continues, generation after generation. The afternoon passes in quiet instruction as you learn to trim the leather to size, to punch holes for the clasps that will hold the book closed, to smooth every surface until it gleams like polished wood. Edmund works mostly in silence, but occasionally he shares bits of wisdom gathered over decades of practice. A book should feel good in the hands, he says. Not too heavy, not too light. The proportions must be pleasing to the eye. A beautiful binding honors the words within. As the Psalter nears completion, Edmund shows you how to attach the metal clasps and catches that will secure the book when it's not in use. The metalwork was done by Brother Martin in his forge, each piece shaped by hand and polished until it shines like silver. The clasps are both functional and beautiful, ensuring that the book will stay closed in storage while adding a final touch of elegance to the binding. You may already be slipping into sleep, lulled by the gentle rhythm of craftwork and the satisfaction of seeing raw materials transformed into something both beautiful and useful. Let the image of the completed book carry you into dreams. The smooth leather cover, the precisely sewn spine, the crisp white pages ready to carry prayers and wisdom through the centuries. There, Edmund says finally, as he closes the completed Psalter and runs his hand over its cover. Another book ready to serve God and his people. 40 years from now, when you and I are dust, this book will still be opening to offer comfort to some troubled soul, still carrying the prayers we've bound within its covers. He places the finished Psalter on a shelf with other recently completed books, each one representing weeks or months of combined effort by scribes, illuminators, and binders. The sight is deeply satisfying. Rows of books that began as living animals and growing plants, transformed through patient human effort into vessels for preserving and sharing knowledge. Tomorrow, Edmund tells you as you clean the binding tools and put them carefully away, we'll begin work on the Aristotle manuscript that Master Geoffrey brought us. Brother Aldrich wants it bound in the finest materials we have, red leather dyed with kermes, brass corners, and silver clasps. It will be a book worthy of the wisdom it contains. You don't need to carry the weight of tomorrow's challenges. Just let the satisfaction of today's completed work settle into your bones like warm honey. The binding of books is slow work, requiring patience and precision, but there's a deep contentment in it that speaks to something fundamental about human nature. The desire to create, to preserve, to pass on what we've learned to those who come after us. As the book takes its final shape in your memory, and the story quietly continues to unfold in other corners of the monastery, you carry with you the knowledge that every book is a small miracle, a collaboration between human hands and divine inspiration, bound together in leather and thread to last for generations yet unborn. A soft gasp echoes. A young monk drops his quill, the sound sharp in the stillness, his face flushed with shame. The afternoon quiet of the scriptorium, which had wrapped around the working monks like a comfortable blanket, suddenly feels fragile, as if that single involuntary sound has cracked something precious. Brother Benedict, barely 18 and new to the community, stares in horror at his quill as it rolls across the stone floor, leaving a thin trail of black ink in its wake. The sound seems to hang in the air longer than it should, amplified by the profound silence that normally governs this sacred space. Every monk in the scriptorium has felt the disruption, though most continue their work with disciplined concentration. Only the slight pause in the gentle scratching of quills against vellum betrays their awareness of the broken rule. In a place where even the softest whisper is discouraged, Brother Benedict's gasp rings like a bell. You look up from your own copying work to see the young monk's face burning with embarrassment. His hands tremble slightly as he bends to retrieve the fallen quill, and you can see the wet shine of unshed tears in his eyes. The manuscript before him, a careful copy of Jerome's letters, bears a fresh blot where his startled hand jerked across the page. Weeks of patient work now marred by a single moment of human frailty. Brother Aldrich, the head scribe, rises slowly from his desk with the deliberate calm that marks all his movements. His weathered face shows no anger, only the gentle concern of someone who has witnessed countless such moments over his decades in the scriptorium. The sound of his sandals against the stone floor whispers softly as he approaches Brother Benedict's workspace, each step measured and unhurried. You may feel your own breathing slow as you watch this quiet drama unfold, and that's perfectly natural. Let the scene wash over you without tension, understanding that even in the most disciplined communities, human nature occasionally breaks through the careful structures we build around ourselves. The other monks continue their work, but you sense their quiet sympathy for their young brother. Every person in this room has experienced similar moments. The dropped tool, the spilled ink, the involuntary sound that shatters the sacred silence. It's part of learning to live within the demanding structure of monastic life, where every action must be considered, every sound weighed against the greater good of the community. Brother Benedict has retrieved his quill now, but his hands shake too much to resume writing. He stares at the ruined page with the despair of someone who takes pride in his work and cannot bear to see it flawed. The blot spreads slowly across the carefully prepared vellum, a dark stain that seems to mock the neat lines of text surrounding it. Hours of work reduced to waste by a moment's carelessness. "Peace, my son," Brother Aldrich says, his voice so soft it barely disturbs the air. The words carry clearly in the profound quiet, and you see several monks glance up briefly before returning to their tasks. "Come, let us walk together." The invitation is gentle but unmistakable. Brother Benedict sets down his quill with careful precision, as if handling it properly now might somehow atone for his earlier clumsiness. He follows Brother Aldrich toward the far corner of the scriptorium, where a small alcove provides space for quiet consultation without disturbing the other workers. As they move away from the main workspace, you notice how Brother Aldrich's presence seems to calm the young monk. The older man's serenity is like a still pool that reflects peace back to anyone who approaches it. His decades of experience have taught him that moments of disruption are opportunities for teaching, not occasions for punishment. In the alcove, Brother Aldrich gestures for Benedict to sit on a small wooden stool while he takes his place on a stone bench that has been worn smooth by countless conversations over the years. The afternoon light filters through a narrow window, casting both men in a gentle glow that softens their features and makes the moment feel almost sacred. "Tell me," Brother Aldrich says, his voice maintaining that careful whisper that respects the scriptorium's quiet even in this semi-private space. "What troubles you today? What caused your hand to startle so?" Brother Benedict's response is barely audible, more breath than voice. "I was thinking of home, brother. Of my mother, and whether she's well. The letter from my sister arrived yesterday, saying mother has taken ill, and I—" He trails off, unable to continue, shame and worry warring in his young features. You don't need to hold on to every word of their conversation. Just let it flow through your awareness like water over stones. The important thing is not the specific details, but the universal experience of homesickness, of worry for loved ones, of the difficulty of maintaining perfect concentration when the heart is troubled. Brother Aldrich nods with the understanding of someone who has counseled many young monks through similar struggles. "The heart cannot be commanded like the hand," he says gently. "When we worry for those we love, that concern follows us even into our most sacred spaces. This is not weakness, it is the mark of a loving soul." The conversation continues in whispers so soft you can barely make out the words, but the tone is one of compassion and patient guidance. Brother Aldrich speaks of his own early struggles with the discipline of monastic life, of mistakes he made and lessons learned. His words seem to ease some of the tension in Brother Benedict's shoulders, and gradually the young monk's breathing becomes less ragged. While this quiet counseling session continues, the rest of the scriptorium maintains its peaceful rhythm. You return to your own work, finding comfort in the familiar scratch of quill against vellum. The manuscript you're copying, a collection of Augustine's meditations, seems to offer its own gentle wisdom about human frailty and divine forgiveness. Brother Francis, the illuminator, has begun work on a new initial letter for the Psalter he's decorating. His brush moves with the steady precision of years of practice, laying down thin lines of gold that will eventually bloom into elaborate vines and flowers. Watching him work is meditation in itself, each stroke deliberate, each color carefully chosen, each element contributing to a larger harmony. The soft scraping sound of Brother Edmund's knife draws your attention to where he's preparing a new piece of vellum, carefully removing the last traces of hair and fat from the sheepskin. The work is tedious and requires great patience, but his movements have the calm rhythm of someone who has found peace in repetitive, necessary tasks. You may already be feeling your eyelids grow heavy, soothed by the return of the scriptorium's normal rhythms and the knowledge that the moment of disruption has been handled with kindness rather than harsh judgment. Let the gentle sounds of productive work carry you deeper into tranquility. After perhaps a quarter hour, Brother Aldrich and Brother Benedict return to the main workspace. The young monk's face still shows traces of his earlier distress, but there's a new calmness about him, as if some internal storm has been weathered and passed. He moves with more confidence now, no longer crushed by his momentary failure. Brother Aldrich pauses at Benedict's desk and examines the damaged page with the same careful attention he gives to all the scriptorium's work. The ink blot has dried now, a permanent mark on the vellum that cannot be erased or corrected. But instead of discarding the page, he makes a small mark in the margin with his own quill. "This page will be bound with the others," he says quietly. "The blot will remain, a reminder that human hands create these books and human hearts guide those hands. Perfection belongs to God alone. We offer him our best efforts, including our mistakes, trusting in his mercy to make them part of something beautiful." Brother Benedict's eyes fill with gratitude at this unexpected grace. The page he thought was ruined will not be discarded, but incorporated into the finished manuscript. His mistake transformed from a source of shame into a testament to divine forgiveness and human compassion. The afternoon continues its gentle progression toward evening. The disruption that seemed so significant when it occurred has been absorbed into the larger rhythm of the scriptorium's life. Brother Benedict returns to his work with renewed focus, though now his concentration seems less brittle, tempered by the understanding that perfection is not required, only sincere effort. As you watch him carefully form each letter, taking extra care but no longer paralyzed by fear of error, you reflect on the wisdom of Brother Aldrich's response. In a community dedicated to preserving knowledge and creating beautiful books, there could easily be harsh punishment for carelessness. Instead, the moment of failure became an opportunity for teaching, for demonstrating the very mercy and forgiveness that the books themselves proclaim. The evening bells will ring soon, calling the community to vespers, but for now the scriptorium continues its sacred work. Brother Benedict's quill moves steadily across fresh vellum, his earlier mistake absorbed into the larger story of learning and growth that defines monastic life. The sounds of productive work, scratching quills, turning pages, the soft whisper of brushes on parchment, create their own form of prayer. Let your mind rest now, floating in the calm that has returned to this sacred space. The silence that was briefly broken has been restored, but it's stronger now, deepened by the compassion that turned a moment of disruption into an opportunity for grace. As the scriptorium settles back into its familiar rhythm, and the story moves gently toward evening, you carry with you the understanding that true discipline is not about avoiding all mistakes, but about meeting our failures with wisdom, kindness, and the patient work of beginning again. Frost clings to the scriptorium's windows, the air sharp with winter's bite, as candles cast a golden glow across the stone walls. You draw your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of the rough fabric against your skin. The monastery has settled into winter's embrace, and with it comes a different kind of silence, deeper, more complete, as if the snow outside has wrapped the entire world in a soft, muffling blanket. Your breath forms small clouds in the cold air as you make your way to your usual place at the long wooden table. The oak surface feels especially cold this morning, and you can see the faint shimmer of frost that has crept through the narrow windows during the night. Brother Thomas, the elderly monk who tends the scriptorium, has already lit the candles, their warm light dancing across the vellum pages and casting gentle shadows that seem to dance with each flicker of flame. The winter mornings here begin even earlier than usual, when the darkness still holds the monastery in its quiet grip. You've learned to appreciate these moments before dawn, when the only sounds are the soft whisper of your own breathing and the occasional crack of settling timber in the cold. There's something almost sacred about working by candlelight, as if you're participating in an ancient ritual that connects you to countless scribes who have come before, each one bent over their manuscripts through countless winters just like this one. You dip your quill into the ink pot, grateful that Brother Thomas has taken care to keep the ink from freezing. The monastery has its ways of managing the winter cold. Small braziers placed strategically around the scriptorium, thick woolen curtains hung over the windows at night, and the constant, gentle warmth that seems to emanate from the very stones themselves, as if they hold the memory of summer's heat deep within their ancient hearts. The manuscript before you today is a copy of the Psalms, its Latin words flowing across the page in the careful, measured script that you've been perfecting for months now. Dominus illuminatio mea et salus mea. The Lord is my light and my salvation. The words seem especially meaningful on this cold winter morning, as the candlelight provides both literal illumination and a metaphorical reminder of the divine light that the monks believe guides their work. As you begin to write, you notice how the cold affects even the simple act of holding a quill. Your fingers move more slowly, more deliberately, and you find yourself pausing between words to warm your hands over the small flame beside you. But there's something beautiful about this enforced slowness, this natural rhythm that winter imposes on the work. Each letter forms more carefully, each word carries more weight, as if the cold itself is teaching you patience. The other scribes work around you in their familiar silence, but you can sense the difference that winter brings to their movements. Robes are pulled closer, hoods drawn up against the drafts that find their way through even the most carefully constructed walls. The soft rustle of fabric seems muffled, and the usual sounds of the scriptorium, the scratch of quills, the whisper of turning pages, the gentle tap of an ink pot against a table, all seem softer, more distant, wrapped in winter's quiet embrace. Brother Marcus, who works at the table nearest the small window, pauses in his copying to breathe warm air onto his hands. You can see the steam rising from his cupped palms, and the gesture reminds you of the simple human needs that persist even in this sacred space. The monks may dedicate their lives to preserving divine knowledge, but they are still men who feel the cold, who must warm their hands and tend to their bodies even as their souls focus on higher things. The parchment beneath your quill seems to respond differently to the cold as well. It's stiffer, less willing to accept the ink, and you find yourself pressing just a little harder, moving just a little slower. But this too becomes part of the meditation, part of the quiet rhythm that governs life in the scriptorium. You don't need to remember these details, just let them drift through your mind like the gentle snowflakes that you can see beginning to fall outside the window. As the morning progresses, the light changes in that subtle way that only winter light can manage. It's cleaner somehow, sharper, filtered through the frost on the windows and reflected off the snow that has begun to accumulate in the cloister garden. The candles remain necessary even as the day grows brighter, their warm light mixing with the cool daylight to create a unique atmosphere that exists only in places like this, only in seasons like this. You become aware of the small sounds that winter brings to the monastery, the distant crack of ice forming in the water basins, the soft whisper of wind through the stone corridors, the occasional creak of timber contracting in the cold. These sounds don't disturb the silence so much as they become part of it, adding texture and depth to the quiet that surrounds you like a comfortable blanket. The text you're copying speaks of comfort and refuge, and you find yourself thinking about how the monastery itself has become a refuge from the winter cold. Not just the physical cold, but the metaphorical cold of a world that often seems harsh and unforgiving. Here, in this quiet room with its flickering candles and devoted scribes, there's a warmth that goes beyond what any brazier could provide. It's the warmth of purpose, of community, of work that has meaning beyond the immediate moment. Brother Thomas moves quietly among the tables, checking on each scribe's work, his worn leather shoes making barely a whisper against the stone floor. When he pauses beside you, you can smell the faint scent of wood smoke that clings to his robes, evidence of the early morning fire he built in the kitchen before coming to tend the scriptorium. His presence is comforting, a reminder that even in this place of silence and solitude, you are not alone. The morning continues its slow, peaceful progression. The snow outside grows heavier, and you can see it accumulating on the narrow ledge outside the window. Each flake that settles adds to the silence, creating an ever deeper quiet that seems to press gently against the walls of the scriptorium. It's not an oppressive silence, but rather a protective one, as if the winter itself is helping to guard the sacred work that takes place within these walls. Your hand moves steadily across the page, forming the familiar shapes of Latin letters with increasing confidence despite the cold. The repetitive motion becomes almost hypnotic, and you feel your breathing slow to match the rhythm of your writing. Each stroke of the quill is deliberate, purposeful, part of a larger work that will outlast this winter, outlast your own time in this place, outlast perhaps even the monastery itself. As the candle beside you burns lower, you notice how the wax has formed small pools of warmth around its base. The sight reminds you of something the abbot said once about how small lights can create comfort even in the darkest times. The scriptorium, with its carefully tended candles and devoted scribes, is itself like a candle flame, small perhaps in the grand scheme of the world, but providing light and warmth to all who enter its circle. You may already be drifting off, carried by the gentle rhythm of winter and candlelight, and that's just fine. Let the cold outside remind you of the warmth within. Let the silence of the snow-covered monastery carry you deeper into rest. The scribes will continue their work through the winter, preserving knowledge and creating beauty in the quiet hours. But for now, you can simply rest in the peace of this moment, wrapped in winter's gentle embrace. As the snow falls outside, the story gently moves on, but you need not follow it. Stay here in the warm circle of candlelight, in the safe silence of the winter library, where every breath is a prayer and every moment is a gift of peace. Your eyes grow heavy, and the scriptorium blurs into a dream, where parchment pages whisper their ancient tales. The candlelight begins to dance differently now, not just flickering with the draft, but swaying with a rhythm all its own, as if responding to music only you can hear. The familiar scratch of your quill against vellum fades into something softer, something that sounds almost like gentle rain on monastery stones, or perhaps the distant murmur of voices from centuries past. In this space between waking and sleeping, the manuscript before you begins to shimmer. The Latin words you've been copying so carefully, in principio erat verbum, in the beginning was the word, seem to lift from the page like golden moths, floating gently in the warm air above your work. You watch, not with surprise but with the calm acceptance that comes only in dreams, as the letters dance and reform themselves into images that glow with their own inner light. The Gospel of John that you've been transcribing opens like a doorway, and suddenly you find yourself standing not in the cold scriptorium, but in a warm garden where the sun never sets. This is the Garden of Eden perhaps, or maybe the paradise that Brother Augustine spoke of in his writings, a place where knowledge and peace exist in perfect harmony. The air here smells of honey and fresh bread, and there's a gentle breeze that carries the sound of distant harps, played by hands you cannot see. You walk along a path made of what appears to be compressed pages, each step revealing glimpses of illuminated letters beneath your feet. Here, a magnificent blue capitol be decorated with intertwining vines and golden birds. There, a crimson D that seems to pulse with its own heartbeat. The colors are more vivid than any you've seen in the waking world, more beautiful than even the finest illuminated manuscripts that Brother Francis creates with his careful brushwork and precious pigments. As you continue walking, you begin to encounter the characters from the texts you've been copying. They don't speak, but somehow you understand their stories perfectly. A figure in simple robes approaches. Perhaps it's one of the apostles from the Gospel narratives, or maybe a saint from the lives of the Holy Fathers that Brother Thomas has been working on. His face radiates a peace so profound that you feel your own breathing slow just from looking at him. The saint, for you know now that's what he is, gestures toward a tree whose leaves are made of vellum pages. Each leaf contains a different story, a different piece of wisdom preserved by countless scribes through the centuries. Some of the leaves show the careful script of your own monastery, while others display the angular letters of Irish monks or the flowing characters of Byzantine scribes. All of them are connected, all part of the same vast tree of knowledge that has been growing since the first word was written down. You reach out to touch one of the leaves, and suddenly you're walking through the story it contains. This one tells of Saint Benedict, the founder of your monastic order, and you find yourself in a cave where he spent his early years in solitude. The stone walls around you seem to breathe with sanctity, and you can hear the gentle drip of water that marked the rhythm of his prayers. The silence here is different from the silence of the scriptorium. It's more alive, more filled with presence, as if the very air is listening. The dream shifts, as dreams do, and now you're in a vast library that stretches further than your eyes can see. The shelves reach impossibly high, disappearing into clouds that glow with soft, pearl-like light. Books of every size and description line the shelves, some bound in simple leather like the ones you know, others decorated with gems and gold that catch and reflect light from sources you cannot identify. The air here smells of aged parchment and the faint sweetness of beeswax, mixed with something else, something that might be the scent of eternity itself. Brother scribes move through this infinite library like gentle spirits, their robes flowing behind them as they tend to their eternal work. Some are copying texts onto pages that seem to write themselves, the words appearing in perfect script without any visible movement of quill or hand. Others are reading aloud, their voices creating a soft chorus that harmonizes perfectly despite speaking in different languages from different centuries. You recognize some of the texts they're working with, the Psalms that have comforted so many hearts, the Gospels that tell the story of divine love, the philosophical works of Aristotle and Plato that preserve ancient wisdom. But there are others too, books that haven't been written yet, stories that exist only in the mind of God, waiting for the right moment to be revealed to the world through the patient work of scribes yet to be born. A figure approaches you. It might be Saint Jerome, the great translator of the Bible, or perhaps Cassiodorus, who founded one of the first monastic libraries. His hands are stained with ink, and his eyes hold the deep contentment of one who has spent his life in service to the written word. Without speaking, he shows you a book that seems to contain every manuscript you've ever copied, every word you've ever written, all bound together in covers that shimmer like water in sunlight. As you open the book, you see your own handwriting, but it's transformed, perfected, glowing with a light that makes the pages seem alive. Each letter you formed with such care in the cold scriptorium is here preserved in this dream library, made eternal and beautiful beyond your wildest imagination. You realize that every moment of patient copying, every hour spent in silence forming letters on vellum, has been building toward this, a contribution to something far greater than yourself. The dream library begins to fill with the sound of singing, not human voices, but the voices of the books themselves, each one adding its unique note to a symphony of preserved knowledge. The Psalms sing of comfort and praise, the Gospels sing of love and redemption, the philosophical works sing of the search for truth and wisdom. Even the most practical texts, the agricultural manuals and the rules of monastic life, add their own harmonies about the dignity of work and the beauty of order. You find yourself singing too, though you've never been much of a singer in the waking world. Your voice blends perfectly with the chorus of books, and you realize that this is what your copying has always been, a form of singing, a way of adding your voice to the great song of human knowledge and divine wisdom that has been growing since the beginning of time. The light in the dream library begins to soften, becoming warmer and more golden, like the light of the candles in the scriptorium. You feel yourself being gently drawn back toward waking, but there's no sadness in this transition. Instead, there's a deep sense of purpose and peace, a knowledge that your work in the scriptorium is connected to something eternal and beautiful. The books around you begin to fade, but their song continues, becoming softer and more distant, like a lullaby that carries you gently toward rest. You can still feel the presence of all those scribes who have come before you, and somehow you know that others will come after, each one adding their own voice to the eternal song of preservation and creation. Let these dreams carry you now, no need to hold on to the details or try to remember every image. The important thing is the feeling, the sense of being part of something larger than yourself, something that transcends the cold stones of the monastery and the brief span of human life. You are a keeper of words, a guardian of wisdom, a singer in the great chorus of human knowledge. As the dream fades into deeper sleep, you can still hear the gentle whisper of pages turning, still feel the weight of the quill in your hand, still sense the profound peace that comes from work done in silence and love. Rest now, dream scribe, and let the monastery of sleep carry you deeper into the night, where all the stories you've copied continue their eternal dance in the library of dreams. The dream may be ending, but its truth remains. Somewhere in the space between sleeping and waking, between the written word and the lived experience, your patient work continues, adding its quiet light to the great illumination of human understanding. The stack of completed manuscripts grows, each page a quiet gift to a world you'll never see. Morning light filters through the scriptorium windows, illuminating the careful pile of finished work that sits on Brother Thomas's desk like a small treasure hoard. Each bound volume represents countless hours of patient labor, thousands of careful pen strokes, and immeasurable devotion to the preservation of knowledge. You run your fingers along the smooth leather spine of a psalter you completed just yesterday, feeling the subtle ridges where the binding thread holds everything together. There's something profound about this moment of completion, this quiet satisfaction that comes not from fanfare or recognition, but from the simple knowledge that good work has been done. The monastery operates on rhythms far different from the outside world, where accomplishments are often measured in immediate rewards or public acclaim. Here, success is measured in pages copied, in knowledge preserved, in the slow but steady building of something that will outlast any individual life. Brother Marcus approaches your table, his arms full of newly prepared vellum sheets. The smell of the treated sheepskin is clean and earthy, carrying with it the promise of stories yet to be told, wisdom yet to be preserved. He sets the stack down with the careful reverence that all the monks show toward their materials, treating each blank page as a sacred canvas waiting to receive the divine word. His weathered hands smooth the top sheet almost tenderly, the gesture of someone who has spent decades understanding the true value of what might seem like simple animal hide to the outside world. Another Gospels copy for the abbey at Winchester. He says in the quiet voice that all the monks use within the scriptorium, barely above a whisper. They lost theirs in a fire last winter. The words carry weight beyond their simple meaning. You understand that somewhere, perhaps 100 miles away, monks are gathering for prayers without their familiar text, making do with memory and worn fragments while they wait for this monastery to provide them with new copies of the sacred words that guide their daily worship. This is the legacy you're building, page by careful page. Not just books, but lifelines thrown across the centuries, connections between communities of faith and learning that might otherwise be isolated by distance or disaster. Every manuscript that leaves this scriptorium carries with it not just text, but the hopes and prayers of the monks who created it, the accumulated wisdom of generations who have found comfort and guidance in these words. You think of the Book of Kells, that magnificent illuminated gospel that Brother Francis described to you once, with its intricate spirals and impossible detail that seem to contain entire worlds within each decorated letter. Created in another monastery much like this one, it represents the pinnacle of what scribal art can achieve when human devotion meets divine inspiration. The monks who created it knew they were making something that would speak to hearts centuries in the future, something that would carry the beauty and mystery of faith across generations yet unborn. The morning progresses with its familiar rhythm, each scribe bent over his work, adding to the great project of preservation that has been continuing for centuries. You realize that you are part of a chain that stretches back to the earliest Christian communities, when believers first began writing down the words and stories that would guide their faith. Every letter you form connects you to those first scribes, working by oil lamp in hidden rooms, copying texts that they knew might mean the difference between survival and extinction for their beliefs. The weight of this responsibility is not burdensome, but rather comforting, like a warm cloak on a cold morning. You are part of something larger than yourself, something that will continue long after your own hands can no longer hold a quill. The young novices who sometimes visit the scriptorium, wide-eyed and eager, represent the future of this work. One day they will sit at these same tables, forming these same letters, preserving these same truths for generations not yet imagined. Brother Thomas moves among the tables, checking each scribe's progress with the quiet authority of someone who has overseen this work for decades. When he pauses beside your table, you can see in his eyes the deep satisfaction of someone who has dedicated his life to something truly worthwhile. His own manuscripts, created over 30 years of patient labor, now rest in monasteries across England and beyond, continuing their silent ministry of preservation and instruction. The library at Cluny has requested another copy of Augustine's City of God, he mentions, making a note on his wax tablet. They say their copy is wearing thin from use. The image this creates is beautiful in its simplicity. Monks in a distant land, wearing out the pages of a beloved text through constant reference and study, until the very love that drives them to the book makes it necessary to create another copy. This is how knowledge survives, not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through the quiet persistence of individuals who understand that some things are too valuable to lose. The fall of Rome left much of Europe in darkness, but in monasteries like this one, scribes continued their patient work, ensuring that the wisdom of the past would be available to light the way forward when the world was ready to learn again. You dip your quill into the ink pot, beginning another page of the text you've been assigned, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, that beautiful meditation on fortune and faith written by a man facing death. The irony is not lost on you that this work, created in a moment of personal crisis and political upheaval, has found new life in the peaceful silence of the scriptorium. Boethius could never have imagined that his words, written in a prison cell, would be lovingly copied by monks centuries later, providing comfort to readers he would never meet in times he could never imagine. This is the miracle of the written word, its ability to transcend the circumstances of its creation and speak across the void of time and space. The manuscript you're creating today might comfort a monk facing his own dark night of the soul decades from now. It might provide guidance to a scholar wrestling with questions of faith and reason in a century yet to come. It might simply rest on a shelf, waiting patiently for the moment when someone needs exactly the wisdom it contains. The afternoon light shifts across the scriptorium, casting long shadows that seem to dance with the flickering candlelight. The pile of completed manuscripts continues to grow, each one representing not just finished work, but future possibility. These books will travel roads you've never seen, rest in libraries you'll never visit, touch lives you'll never know. Yet in some mysterious way, your careful script will be present in all those distant moments, a quiet ambassador of beauty and truth. Brother Francis stops by your table, carrying one of his illuminated manuscripts. The colors seem to glow even in the dim light of the scriptorium. Blues deeper than the sky at midnight, reds richer than the finest wine, gold that captures and holds the light like trapped sunshine. For the cathedral at Canterbury, he says simply, but you can hear the quiet pride in his voice. This manuscript will join others in one of England's most important libraries, taking its place among treasures that scholars will study for centuries to come. As the day draws toward evening, you find yourself thinking about the great library at Alexandria, that legendary repository of knowledge that held the wisdom of the ancient world. When it was destroyed, so much was lost forever. Works of philosophy and science, poetry and history that can never be recovered. But here, in this small monastery, the work of preservation continues. Not on the grand scale of Alexandria, perhaps, but with the same dedication to the principle that knowledge is sacred and must be protected. You don't need to carry this weight alone, of course. The burden of preservation is shared among thousands of scribes in hundreds of monasteries, each one adding their contribution to the great project of keeping human wisdom alive. When you lay down your quill at the end of the day, others are picking up theirs in scriptoriums across Europe, ensuring that the work never truly stops. The stack of completed manuscripts catches the last light of day, their leather bindings glowing softly in the golden illumination. Each one is ready to begin its journey into the world, carrying within its pages the accumulated wisdom of ages and the careful devotion of the monks who created it. You may already be feeling drowsy, lulled by the rhythm of preservation and creation, and that's perfectly fine. Let the legacy of the library carry you now into rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring new pages to copy, new wisdom to preserve, new gifts to send into a world that needs them more than it knows. The great work continues, page by quiet page, building a bridge of knowledge across the centuries that no darkness can completely destroy. An elder monk, his hands worn from years of copying, beckons you to his side, his voice a gentle whisper that seems to carry the weight of decades spent in quiet contemplation. Brother Aldrich has been part of this monastery for longer than anyone can remember, his bent figure as familiar as the stone walls themselves. His workspace sits in the corner where two windows meet, allowing him to catch the best light during the precious hours when his aging eyes can still make out the fine details of his illuminated manuscripts. You approach his table with the reverence that his presence naturally inspires. At 83 years old, Brother Aldrich represents living history. He has witnessed the copying of thousands of manuscripts, has seen young novices grow into master scribes, has weathered seasons of plenty and seasons of scarcity, always returning to his quiet work with the same patient dedication. His hands, gnarled now with age and stained permanently with decades of ink, rest gently on the pages of what he tells you will be his final manuscript. "Come, sit beside me, young scribe," he says, his voice carrying the soft cadence of someone who has learned to speak quietly not just from monastic discipline, but from years of understanding that the most important truths need not be shouted to be heard. You settle onto the wooden stool beside his bench, feeling the worn smoothness of its surface, polished by countless hours of use by scribes who have sat in this same spot seeking wisdom from this remarkable man. The manuscript before him is a copy of the Psalms, but unlike any you have seen before. Each page glows with subtle illuminations. Not the grand, elaborate decorations that sometimes grace important ceremonial books, but gentle, almost whispered embellishments that seem to grow naturally from the text itself. Tiny birds perch on the ascending letters, delicate vines curl around the margins, and here and there, faces peer out from the capitals with expressions of such peace that you feel your own breathing slow just from looking at them. Do you know why we maintain silence in the scriptorium? Brother Aldrich asks, his weathered finger tracing one of the illuminated letters with a touch so light it barely seems to contact the vellum. It's not really a question expecting an answer, but rather an invitation to explore a mystery that has guided his entire adult life. You've heard the practical reasons, of course. Silence aids concentration, prevents errors, maintains the sacred atmosphere necessary for copying holy texts. But looking into the elder monk's eyes, you sense he's about to share something deeper. Silence, he continues, is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of something far more profound. He pauses, allowing his words to settle in the quiet air between you. Outside, you can hear the distant sound of bells calling the brothers to evening prayers. But here in this corner of the scriptorium, time seems suspended, held in the gentle space that Brother Aldrich's presence creates around him. When I first came to this monastery 57 years ago, I thought silence was a burden to be endured, he shares, a soft smile creasing his weathered features. I was young, full of words and ideas that seemed so important they simply had to be spoken. The silence felt like a cage, constraining all the things I believed needed to be said. His hand moves to rest on a stack of completed manuscripts beside him, the gesture unconscious but deeply meaningful. But gradually, slowly, the silence began to teach me. It showed me that beneath all our words, beneath all our thoughts and concerns and daily worries, there exists a deeper current, a place where the soul can rest and listen to the voice that speaks without sound. As he talks, his hands continue their gentle movements across the manuscript, not actively working but simply maintaining that connection between craftsman and creation that defines a life spent in service to the written word. You find yourself leaning closer, drawn not just by his words but by the profound peace that seems to emanate from him like warmth from a banked fire. This is what decades of silence can create in a person. Not emptiness, but a fullness so complete that it overflows naturally into wisdom and compassion. In the early years of my copying work, Brother Aldrich continues, I focused entirely on accuracy. Every letter had to be perfect, every line straight, every word precisely formed. This is important, of course. The sacred texts deserve our very best efforts. But I was so concerned with the correctness of the letters that I sometimes forgot to listen to what they were saying. He turns a page of his manuscript, revealing a passage from Psalm 46, "Be still, and know that I am God." The words seemed to glow in the afternoon light, surrounded by his delicate illustrations of water and mountains, visual metaphors for the peace that comes from divine trust. It was during my 20th year here that I finally understood, he says, his voice growing even softer, as if he's sharing a sacred secret. I was copying this very psalm, these very words, when suddenly the letters seemed to arrange themselves not just on the page, but in my heart. Be still. Not just my hands, not just my voice, but my entire being. And no, not just with my mind, but with something deeper, something that exists beyond thought. You can feel your own breathing beginning to synchronize with his, slow, deep, peaceful. The urgency and anxiety that sometimes accompany daily life seem to dissolve in the presence of this man who has spent more than half a century learning the art of inner stillness. The silence we maintain here is not punishment, Brother Aldrich explains, returning to his original question. It is invitation. An invitation to discover the space within ourselves where God speaks in whispers softer than the scratch of quill on vellum, gentler than the flutter of pages turning, quieter than our own heartbeat. He shows you a page where he has illustrated the opening words of Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." Around the text, he has drawn a peaceful landscape of rolling hills and still waters, but what strikes you most is the quality of stillness he has somehow captured in the illumination. Even the sheep in his drawing seem to rest in perfect peace, surrounded by an almost visible sense of divine protection. When you copy these sacred words, he continues, you are not just preserving them for others to read. You are allowing them to be written upon your own soul. Each letter you form with care becomes a prayer, each completed page a meditation, each finished manuscript a testament to the transformation that occurs when human effort aligns itself with divine purpose. The shadows in the scriptorium are lengthening now, and Brother Aldrich lights a small candle beside his work. The flame dances gently, casting a warm glow across his face and illuminating the deep contentment that resides there. You realize that this is what peace looks like when it has been cultivated over decades. Not the temporary calm that comes from favorable circumstances, but the unshakable serenity that springs from a life lived in harmony with its deepest purpose. I have copied thousands of pages, he says, his hand resting now on the completed portion of his manuscript. I have formed hundreds of thousands of letters, preserved countless words of wisdom and beauty. But the greatest manuscript has been the one written by God upon my own heart through the patient practice of silence and devotion. His words seem to hang in the air like incense, creating a sacred space around the two of you. You feel a profound gratitude for this moment, this opportunity to sit beside someone who has discovered what it means to live a life of true contemplation. The silence will teach you if you let it, Brother Aldrich whispers, his voice now barely audible above the soft sounds of evening settling over the monastery. It will show you that beneath all the noise of the world, beneath all the urgency and worry and constant activity, there exists a place of perfect stillness where the soul can rest. Let his words drift through you now, carrying you toward that place of inner quiet he describes. You don't need to grasp them or try to remember every detail. Like the gentle illuminations on his manuscripts, they are meant to be experienced rather than analyzed, felt rather than fully understood. As the candle flame flickers softly beside you, and Brother Aldrich returns to his quiet work with the contentment of someone who has found his true calling, you feel yourself being drawn into that same profound stillness he has spent a lifetime cultivating. Rest now in this silence that is not empty but full, not lonely but accompanied by the deepest peace imaginable. The monastery around you settles into evening quiet, but you have learned that true silence is not dependent on external circumstances. It is a gift that can be carried anywhere, a sanctuary of the soul that no outer noise can disturb once it has been truly discovered. Your quill makes its final stroke, the last letter curling onto the vellum, as the scriptorium holds its breath. The N at the end of Amen curves gracefully, completing not just a word, but weeks of patient, devoted work. You lift the quill from the page and set it gently in its rest, watching as a single drop of ink trembles at its tip before falling back into the well with the softest whisper. The manuscript lies before you, complete at last. 43 pages of sacred text, each letter formed with care, each line straight and true. The vellum seems to glow in the candlelight, as if the words themselves have gathered light and are now releasing it back into the quiet air of the scriptorium. You don't need to hold on to this moment of accomplishment. Just let it settle into your bones like warmth from a gentle fire. Around you, the other scribes continue their work, but you sense their awareness of your completion. Brother Augustine glances up from his desk with the faintest smile, his weathered face creasing with quiet approval. Brother Thomas, the illuminator, pauses in his work on a capital letter to nod in your direction. These are not grand gestures of celebration. In this place of sacred silence, approval comes in whispers and gentle acknowledgments that barely disturb the air. The abbot approaches your desk with the soft shuffle of sandaled feet on stone. His presence is like approaching candlelight, warm, steady, reassuring. He stands beside your bench, his hands clasped behind his back, studying your completed work with eyes that have examined thousands of manuscripts over the decades. You may already be drifting off, carried by the rhythm of his quiet breathing, and that's just fine. Well done, my child, he murmurs, his voice barely louder than the scratch of quills around you. His words carry the weight of genuine praise, earned through weeks of patient labor. Your letters grow more beautiful with each page. The angels themselves would be pleased to read such script. The manuscript you've completed is a psalter, the book of Psalms copied for use in the monastery's daily prayers. Each psalm has been transcribed with meticulous care, from the triumphant verses of Psalm 100 to the gentle comfort of Psalm 23. These words, written by your hand, will be sung by generations of monks in this very chapel, their voices lifting the same verses toward heaven that now rest in ink upon vellum before you. Medieval manuscripts like this one were far more than simple books. They were repositories of civilization itself. In an age when few could read and books were rarer than gold, monasteries like this one served as the guardians of human knowledge. The works of Aristotle and Cicero, the writings of the Church Fathers, the sacred scriptures, the chronicles of kings and saints, all preserved by patient scribes working in scriptoriums just like this one. The abbot lifts your manuscript with reverent hands, feeling its weight, not just the physical weight of vellum and ink, but the spiritual weight of sacred words preserved for eternity. "This will go to our library," he says softly, "where it will rest among the treasures of our house. Long after we have gone to our reward, these words will still sing God's praise." You watch as he carries your work to the great oak lectern near the scriptorium's eastern window, where completed manuscripts await the bookbinder's art. Soon, your pages will be sewn between wooden boards and covered in leather, transformed from loose sheets into a bound volume that could last 1,000 years. But you don't need to think about that distant future now. Just rest in the gentle satisfaction of work completed. The candlelight flickers across your empty desk, dancing over the small ink stains that mark where you've labored these many weeks. Your right hand, the one that guided the quill through countless letters, feels light and strange without its familiar weight. There's a small callus on your middle finger where the quill rested, a badge of honor earned through patient dedication to the sacred art of writing. Brother Francis, the monastery's head scribe, approaches with a fresh piece of vellum and a new text to be copied. "When you're ready," he says with quiet kindness, "we have the Gospel of Matthew waiting for your hand." But there's no urgency in his voice. In this place, time moves with the rhythm of prayer and contemplation, not with the harsh demands of the world beyond these walls. The scriptorium begins to settle into its evening rhythm. Candles are lit against the gathering dusk, their flames steady and true in the still air. The scratch of quills continues, a gentle percussion that speaks of dedication and devotion. Some scribes will work until Compline, the final prayer of the day, while others will set aside their quills with the last light of the sun. You flex your fingers, feeling the subtle ache that comes from hours of precise work. It's a good ache, the kind that speaks of useful labor, of contribution to something greater than yourself. In the world beyond the monastery walls, your work might seem insignificant. Who notices one more copy of the Psalms in a world full of concerns about harvest and weather, politics and trade? But here, in the gentle light of the scriptorium, you understand the deeper truth. Each letter you've written is a prayer made visible, each word a small act of devotion. The manuscript that now rests on the lectern will carry these prayers into the future, long after your hand has forgotten the weight of the quill and your eyes have closed for the last time. The monastery cat appears, as cats do, weaving between the desks with fluid grace. It approaches your bench and rubs against your leg, purring with the deep contentment of a creature that has found its perfect place in the world. You reach down to scratch behind its ears, feeling the vibration of its purr against your fingers. Another small moment of peace in this sanctuary of quiet devotion. As full darkness settles outside the scriptorium's windows, the bell rings for vespers. The scribes begin to set aside their work, covering inkwells and cleaning quills with the same care they bring to everything in this sacred space. You join them in this evening ritual, your movements slow and deliberate, each small task performed with mindful attention. The completed manuscript catches the candlelight one last time as you prepare to leave your desk. 43 pages of sacred text, ready to take their place in the monastery's library, ready to serve God and preserve knowledge for generations yet to come. You may already be slipping into sleep, and that's just fine. Let the satisfaction of completion carry you into peaceful dreams. Tomorrow, you'll begin again with fresh vellum and newly mixed ink. The Gospel of Matthew awaits your careful attention, its familiar stories ready to flow from your quill onto the waiting page. But that's tomorrow's work, tomorrow's devotion, tomorrow's quiet contribution to the great project of preserving human wisdom and divine truth. Tonight, as you follow the other monks toward the chapel for evening prayers, you carry with you the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work completed with love and care. The scriptorium falls quiet behind you, but its silence is not empty. It's full of patient purpose, ready to welcome you back when the sun rises and the great work continues. As the manuscript is set aside, the story gently closes. Tonight, we've wandered through the silent halls of a medieval library, where every page was a labor of love and every moment was wrapped in calm. We've felt the weight of the quill in our fingers, breathed in the scent of parchment and beeswax, and discovered the sacred peace that comes from work done in devoted silence. You've walked the stone corridors of a 12th-century monastery, where knowledge was preserved one careful letter at a time. You've sat in the scriptorium as sunlight filtered through narrow windows, casting gentle shadows across vellum pages. You felt the cool morning air in the cloister garden, where herbs grew not just for beauty, but to create the very inks that brought words to life. In that quiet world, silence wasn't empty. It was full of purpose, full of reverence, full of the deep understanding that some of life's most important work happens in stillness. The monks who bent over their writing desks, hour after hour, day after day, were doing more than copying words. They were weaving a bridge between past and future, ensuring that wisdom would survive the passage of centuries. As your mind floats through these ancient rooms, you carry the quiet wisdom of the scribes. You've learned that patience has its own rhythm, that dedication creates its own peace, and that in a world full of noise and hurry, there's profound beauty in choosing stillness. The gentle scratch of quill on vellum, the soft rustle of turning pages, the whispered prayers that rose like incense. These sounds become part of you now, a lullaby written in history's most peaceful moments. Perhaps you felt your breathing slow to match the monastery's ancient rhythm. Perhaps your shoulders have released their tension, settling into the same restful posture as those long-ago scribes when they finally set aside their quills at day's end. The stone walls that surrounded them now surround you too, offering the same shelter from the world's demands, the same invitation to simply be present in this moment of perfect quiet. The manuscript you completed in that scriptorium, with its careful letters and patient dedication, joins the countless other treasures preserved in libraries around the world. Every book that has survived from the Middle Ages passed through hands like yours, guided by hearts devoted to the sacred act of preservation. In learning their story, you've become part of that great chain of guardians, keepers of knowledge, lovers of wisdom. But now it's time to rest. Let the silence of the scriptorium cradle you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Feel yourself settling into your bed like settling onto that worn stone bench in the monastery garden, supported and safe. Let the day's worries drift away like morning mist over ancient walls. The candles in the scriptorium have burned low, their flames steady and calm as they light your way into dreams. The monks have set aside their quills and closed their books, but the peace they created lingers still, wrapping around you like the softest blanket, carrying you gently toward sleep. In your dreams tonight, you might hear the distant sound of bells calling the faithful to prayer, or the whisper of pages turning in a library where time moves slowly and every moment is touched with grace. You might feel sunlight warming stone walls, or breathe air scented with lavender and old parchment. These dreams are yours to keep, gentle gifts from a world where silence was sacred and every written word was a prayer. The medieval library closes its doors behind you now, but its peace goes with you. The quiet wisdom of the scribes becomes your own, a reminder that in this busy world, there's always a place of stillness waiting. Sometimes in memory, sometimes in dreams, always in the deep, restful silence of your own peaceful heart. Good night, my friend, and may your dreams be as gentle as the turning of a page.